Chapter 741. NK-17S loaded with missile clips and large caliber cannons, under the cover of the first wave of landing troops, rushed to the beach that had been blown up by the battle between human beings and the MA army, which made it look particularly embarrassing. Not only did these armored troops, who had just stepped off the landing ship, rush to the front line at full speed along the route opened by the first wave of landing troops, but they also took advantage of the weakening of the enemy's artillery fire and took the lead to bombard the enemy with barges. That was the sound of cannon fire. The missiles that soared into the sky one after another became the main theme of the beaches around Carpinteria. The only difference was that the side being attacked would not scream like humans dying tragically. It would only fall into a dead silence after being defeated, or would erupt with a strong energy explosion, dragging everything around it, enemies and even allies, into the underworld. Attack! Attack! Mobile Engineer Team 1, you are too slow. Follow the advance of Glaze's troops. Team 3, you are too fast. Wait for the landing of the follow-up troops. There were commands from the bridge of the mothership in the communication channel. Judging from the content, what Gallowhorn's fleet, which had been hastily put together, could do had exceeded expectations. Whether it was McGillis or Duke Badwin, the expectations of this hastily assembled fleet were focused on being able to contain the ancient disaster that broke out in Oceania in the first place. But judging from the scene, although this temporary fleet had some discordant voices at the beginning of the battle, as the battle progressed, the fleet showed a determination to work together to face the ancient disaster together. This result was undoubtedly good news for McGillis. However, McGillis seemed to have another opinion. There was no other reason. It was when he personally flew Gao de Bailey from the mothership and appeared at the forefront of the landing battlefield under the watchful eyes of the public. After he personally took care of the most difficult nail, all the discordant voices were silenced by Gao de Bailey's blade. Gao de Bailey, the supreme power of the commander and Lars Horn. The cold blade was ruthlessly inserted into the head of the unknown MA that fell at the feet of Gao de Bailey. McGillis looked at Glaze's troops, NK-17, and other mobile engineer troops that charged from the left and right sides of Gao de Bailey, and he could not help but feel a trace of elation in his heart. Commander, an unknown MA appeared on the eastern line of the landing field. From the appearance, it is very similar to the MA that was just cut down by Gao de Bailey. At this time, the communication from the mothership pulled McGillis back to reality. Understood. Now, I will rush over. Hold on. When the blade was pulled out, a trace of black and slippery liquid also splashed out from the wound of the unknown MA and left stains on Gao de Bailey's leg armor. This was an MA that was somewhat similar to M.A. Hammond's. But in terms of body shape, appearance, and even weapons, it was very different from M.A. Hammond's. If M.A. Hammond's was an airframe that took into account firepower, defense, and speed, then this M.A. that was cut down by Gao de Bailey was probably a specialized type that leaned towards firepower. When it was discovered, Gao de Bailey, who led Glaze's troops to break through the defense line of the M.A. army, was hit by a beam cannon. If it weren't for McGillis's quick reaction, he would have used the pair of blades equipped by the Gundabei Force as a temporary shield and the anti-beam nanocoating on the Gundabei Force itself. Even if the Gundabei Force did not withdraw from the battlefield, it would have been greatly affected, causing the morale of Gallowhorn's side to plummet. Bahrain. McGillis's voice came from Gao de Bailey, who was rushing to the next battlefield, which made the CIC, who was in charge of contacting him, stunned. See, Commander, what are you talking about? The CIC did not dare to neglect and quickly asked. M.A. Bahrain. This is the name of the new M.A. It turned out that McGillis gave the name to the unknown M.A. just now. Yes, understood. Although they were puzzled as to why McGillis would suddenly give the new enemy a name, the CIC immediately entered the name into Lars Horn's identification system. The battle that lasted for 10 hours not only did not end, it became even more intense. As more citizens, and even the local Lars Horn garrison of Carpinteria, were rescued from the burning city, The fleet that was specifically formed to fight against the ancient doomed sacrifice also had a better understanding of the enemy that occupied Carpentaria. The beam of light that soared into the sky attracted McGillis's attention. It was the beam cannon that Bahrain fired. Commander, according to the information provided by the refugees we took in and the local garrison, the enemies are 3 Bahrainis and no less than 1,000 bloomin' servants. Just 3 Bahrainis? Gaudabayri stood on a ruined building and watched Glaze's troops that were besieging Ma Bahrain. After the first encounter, Glaze's troops paid a price, but they also gradually saw through the mob Bahrain's attack pattern. As a result, Gaudabayri, who rushed all the way here, found that he didn't seem to need to get involved in the battle that Ma Bahrain was doomed to die. Yes. In addition, according to the information we have access to, Carpentaria had the experience of resisting the invasion when the ancient doomed sacrifice attacked. Although we don't know the general situation, we can be sure that Carpentaria resisted for at least 3 days before a fleet arrived. 3 days? McGillis frowned when he heard the time. If the garrison of Carpentaria was not defeated instantly, then why didn't the local command system send a request for help to Lars Horn headquarters? Yes. After learning of the situation, we immediately set out to find people who knew the situation from the local garrison that was rescued. As a result, we found that Carpentaria had sent a request for help to headquarters the moment the ancient doom sacrifice attacked. Unfortunately, neither headquarters nor our fleet received a request for help from Carpentaria. This situation made McGillis have a new guess about the fall of Carpentaria. If Carpentaria had sent out a request for reinforcements at the first moment of the ancient doomed sacrificers' invasion, but had not received a reply from Gjallarhorn's headquarters, then it probably meant that either the ancient doomed sacrificers who had crawled out of the ashes of history had a new method, or that there was a traitor among the humans like Isnario Farid. However, even if he continued to think about this question, it wouldn't help. Until the ancient doomed sacrifice that wreaked havoc in Carpentaria was wiped out, these guesses were only guesses. Then, let's speed up our advance. There were more and more mysteries, but McGillis knew that as long as they attacked the central city of Carpentaria, even if they couldn't solve all the mysteries, they would still be able to find clues to solve the mystery. Thus, Gauda brandished his twin swords again and charged towards the Mazda that was surrounded by Gray's troops. In the blink of an eye, the Gundam pierced through Ma Bahrain's body with a single slash. Soldiers, now that we have control of the landing zone, it's time to launch a new round of attack into the depths of Carpentaria. Follow me. Follow the guidance of the Gundam Bale. Charge. Pulling out his sword, Gao Da's sword didn't even look at the Mazda that was pierced through. He leaped up and charged into the city. Unlike the wide view of the landing field, after entering the city, the surroundings were constantly rising and falling. The tall and short buildings made Bale's field of vision narrower and narrower. Is the space getting smaller? Through the Alea consciousness, McGillis could clearly feel a sense of oppression coming from the surroundings. It wasn't just the oppression of the space being compressed by the buildings. It was also the abnormal feeling of something quickly occupying and controlling the city. Suddenly, an electroshock tore through McGillis's mind. McGillis instinctively controlled Gao Da's sword to slash at the building on the left. Boom! The moment the sword slashed at the building, a black shadow that even the billowing dust couldn't cover appeared in front of McGillis. That's Gray's. Withdrawing his sword, Gao Da's sword quickly retreated. After creating a safe distance, McGillis also saw the true face of the black shadow in the gradually dissipating dust. Gray's? No, that's not Gray's. Even if it had a similar appearance, McGillis was very sure that it wasn't Gray's. Because the moment the black shadow's true face appeared in front of McGillis, Gao Da's Alea consciousness had already told McGillis that the body in front of him was not Gray's. Compared to Gray's oval head, the unfamiliar body's head was much more pointed and long. The most eye-catching monitor was emitting a flame-like reddish-yellow light. Although the armor on its body was very similar to Gray's, the overall appearance was more inclined to the monotonous and rigid style of the ancient Doom ritual. An ancient Doom ritual imitation of Gray's. McGillis thought of this possibility on the spot, but the attack that followed made McGillis have no time to think about it. The battle axe that broke through the air and attacked the surrounding buildings as if they were nothing. While constantly chopping down dust, it launched a fierce attack on Gao Da's Alea consciousness. McGillis didn't dare to be negligent. From the moment he appeared, the ancient doom ritual invasion that caused the fall of Carpentaria had made McGillis feel like he couldn't control the overall situation. The attack speed didn't decrease. Gao Da's Alea consciousness relied on its propelling wings to nimbly and quickly dodge the strange gray's attack. At the same time, McGillis was surprised to find that the strange gray's strength allowed it to continuously hack the surrounding buildings and chase after Gao Da's Alea consciousness while still maintaining the speed of Gao Da's footsteps. "Commander, we're here to support you." While he was dodging, the gray's troops that were behind Gao Da's Alea consciousness finally arrived. "Attack that grays. That's not our ally." In fact, there was no need for McGillis's reminder. Glaze, who was chasing after the Gundam Bale, could tell at a glance that it was an enemy, not an ally. Da-da-da-da-da. Without any explanation, 3 grays quickly occupied the high ground and locked onto the strange grays and fired a series of shots. But this rapid and accurate attack didn't hit the strange grays. Instead, it became a precursor to the strange grays' retreat. The strange grays waved its battle axe in the air and unexpectedly cut down more than half of the incoming bullets before it turned around and ran. At the same time, the moment it retreated, it waved its battle axe and destroyed more than half of a building beside it, raising enough smoke and dust to obscure McGillis and the others' vision. "Don't chase. Be careful of an ambush." McGillis immediately stopped his subordinates who wanted to chase. "Commander, who was that graze just now?" "No, I don't know either. But the only thing that's clear is that it's an enemy. Whether it's a human or in Doom Ritual, that body that looks like grays will only be our enemy." Yes, this Battle of Carpentaria was probably not as simple as Lars Horn thought. On the other side of the ocean, at an airport in Abro, a long-distance transport aircraft was making its final preparations for takeoff. "Steady, steady. Continue to retreat." "Yes, that's right. Continue to retreat." A heavy transport vehicle slowly pushed a shelf wrapped in canvas along the landing gear into the open cabin of the aircraft. The youths around it carefully watched the movements of the transport vehicle so that they could give timely warnings. "Kai, is it enough to only bring Mitsuyuki and Barbados?" On the observation deck, Lakis stretched out her hand and stroked her hair that was messed up by the breeze as she asked softly. "Yes, it's enough. Actually, if it were possible, I would prefer to only bring State Zero to Carpentaria. But unfortunately, Olga's side is too stubborn." Ray Minkai sighed and turned to look at Lakis. "Commander Olga is just worried about your safety." From a news from Carpentaria, Lars Horn's attack seems to have been blocked outside the city center for a few days. No matter how Lars Horn's joint fleet attacks, it seems like they can't break into the city center. While gradually gaining the recognition and trust of Abro's officials, Lakis could already come into contact with most of Abro's affairs. Because of that, Lakis could not immediately move together with Ray Minkai. That's only temporary. You must know that Kalta issue has been in the sky for a long time. I believe that by the time I reach Carpentaria, there will be a meteor shower in Carpentaria's sky. Chapter 742. The momentum of Lars Horn's successful landing was ultimately suppressed by the ancient Doom sacrifice. Originally, in the original plan, the Gallahorn mixed fleet led by McGillis wanted to take advantage of the successful landing battle to recapture the periphery of Carpentaria and establish an outpost base at the same time. However, this plan was thwarted by the sudden and fierce counterattack of the ancient Doom sacrifice. While McGillis frowned, it also caused the high morale of the Lars Horn mixed fleet to suffer a setback. However, this setback only lasted for a moment. McGillis only muttered to himself for a moment before letting it go. If the ancient Doom sacrifice that revived from history was so easy to deal with, humanity wouldn't have almost gone extinct. It wasn't until a quarter of the human population was wiped out by the ancient Doom sacrifice and Lars Horn was established to become the leader of humanity against the ancient doom sacrifice, that the situation began to turn around. If it wasn't for that, how could a Gauda Bailai he was piloting be regarded as the symbol of supreme power? Commander, Squads 3, 5, 9, and 13 encountered the strange Greys that fought with Commander earlier in A1 and C3 respectively. The news from the front line from the mothership made McKillis slightly focused. Casualties? McKillis had a deep understanding of the strength of the strange Greys. If it weren't for his Gundabei of force and Alea's sense being sufficiently powerful, McGillis would have been suppressed by the freakish Glaze in a single exchange of blows. He might have even been defeated in a single exchange of blows. Yes, Squad 3 lost to Greys. Squads 5 and 9 didn't suffer any losses because they encountered the enemy in a joint search. But Squad 13 was completely wiped out. Completely wiped out? The final answer was not out of McGillis's expectations. Temporarily slowed down the attack and establish an outpost in the area we control. Pay attention to the enemy's movements. Yes, understood. After sending out a series of orders to postpone the attack, McGillis disconnected from Gaudabayri. After the Alea system was disconnected, McGillis walked out of Gaudabayri's cockpit and looked at the sea occupied by his and Lars Horn's fleet. Above the steel warships built by the humans was the moon hanging high in the night sky. Looking at the faint moonlight scattered on the surface of the sea, McGillis suddenly had the misconception that on the day of the doomed sacrifice 300 years ago, Agunica Cairo had also thrown herself into the battlefield under the illumination of the moon in the sky. There's still plenty of time. Am I right? Agunica Cairo. At the same time, under the night sky, there was a large transport plane that took off from Abro, crossed several time zones, and finally entered the airspace near Oceania when the full moon hung over Carpentaria. Outside the porthole, spots of light could be seen on the pitch-black land. Those were not the lights of human activities, nor were they the lights of the city at night. Instead, they were the lights of death that symbolized the meaningless depletion of life. Beep, beep. The lights on the cabin wall flickered back and forth a few times. Then the captain's voice came from the earpiece. Sir Ray Minkai, 3 Suns and Moons August. We are now half an hour away from Carpentaria. Please prepare for the airborne landing. When the time comes, we will do the airborne landing as close to the city center of Carpentaria as possible. However, please do not have too high of an expectation. After a pause, the captain's voice seemed to have a hint of a bitter smile. After all, we are not sure if there will be enemies like M.A. Hammonds in the city center of Carpentaria. Roger that. We have no problems with the mission here. Please do the airborne landing while ensuring your own safety. After we disembark, we will approach our allies on our own. Please do not worry. There was nothing wrong with the captain's choice. Ray Minkai also understood the captain's decision. After all, only MS and battleships were qualified to use the nano anti-beam coating. Reconnaissance aircraft, transport aircraft, and even the mobile engineers on the ground to assist MS troops were not qualified to use it. Therefore, under uncertain circumstances, the large transport aircraft did not dare to take the risk of being shot down by MA's nano anti-beam cannons and fly into the city center of Carpentaria. Has it begun? 3 Suns and Moons shook his head, shook off the heavy, soundproof earpiece, and looked at Gauda Babados, who was wrapped in a canvas. It has begun. 3 Suns and Moons, go and get ready. Roger that. In the night sky, the large transport aircraft soaring high in the sky finally began to descend after traversing more than half of the Earth. Facing the fading night and the rising dawn, it flew towards Carpentaria below. At the same time, Lars and Horn's mixed fleet that was constantly monitoring the airspace above Carpentaria also noticed the large transport aircraft that had suddenly entered the battlefield. Commander, the reinforcements sent by Abro have arrived above Carpentaria and are carrying out airborne operations according to the plan. McGillis, who heard the news, suddenly opened his eyes. Through the open cockpit door, he looked at the sky above Carpentaria and saw the large transport aircraft that was entering the best route. Of course, The humans were not the only ones who noticed the large transport aircraft. As the ancient, doomed sacrifice that continued to firmly control the city of Carpentaria, it also immediately noticed the large transport aircraft that descended from the sky. Even though this lone large transport plane didn't seem to be a threat, it didn't seem to pose much of a threat. However, the AI army that faithfully carried out the defense strategy immediately mobilized forces and tried to intercept this large transport aircraft. "We have been locked on. Mr. Ray Minkai, we can only send you here. Now begin the airborne descent." The captain, who controlled the descending altitude of the transport aircraft, looked at the countless red lights that suddenly lit up the dark city below and quickly shouted, "Roger that. We are ready. Release Barbados first." As soon as Ray Minkai responded, the captain immediately opened the cockpit door and began the airborne operation. In an instant, the entire cockpit was filled with the cold wind that poured in from the open cockpit door. TSK, this feeling, it's so strong. Although the cold wind that poured into the cockpit was like a knife raging madly, State Zero sat on the container and watched as Ray Minkai flipped the switch and sent Gauda Barbados out of the cockpit. Walala! The moment the pulley block swept across the floor, Gauda Barbados slid out of the cockpit and fell toward the city below. The moment the large transport aircraft lost the heavy weight of Gauda Barbados, it could not help but jolt. "Good. Hold on. Mr. Ray Minkai, please land as soon as possible. More and more monsters are paying attention to us below." The captain, who was trying his best to control the transport aircraft, continued to shout loudly and told Ray Minkai what he saw. In fact, even if the captain did not say it, Ray Minkai had already seen the scene below from the open cockpit door. However, the swaying and densely packed red dots were no longer located in the cold extreme north, but in the big city at the southern end of the equator. "This is Ray Minkai, calling the crew, starting the airborne operation. Thank you for sending us all the way." "Roger that. This is what we should do. After landing, help us out too." "Roger that. Over." The moment he took off the earphones and threw them to the corner, State Zero ran up to Ray Minkai's shoulder against the cold wind. That was the throne it sat on when it was in the form of a white cat. "Kai, let's begin." "Okay." Facing the cold wind, Ray Minkai, who was not wearing any landing equipment, opened his arms and jumped down while staring at the dark city below. In the next second, a beam of light split the darkness and shot out from the deepest part of the dark city, heading straight for the transport aircraft that was about to turn and leave Carpentaria. It was an attack. The situation that the captain of the transport aircraft was worried about had happened. The blazing beam of light tugged at the strings of the night and burst out a deafening buzzing sound, attracting the attention of all the creatures that were not asleep to the blazing and terrifying beam of light. "Quick, quick, leave his place." The cockpit was not completely closed. The turn was not completed. A worrying attack followed closely. The transport aircraft was almost unable to avoid it. At this moment, it was as if doomsday had arrived for the transport aircraft and its crew. At this moment, the captain suddenly had an illusion of relief. Fortunately, the mission was completed just a moment ago. Rumble! The terrifying energy flow traversed the night sky and swallowed the transport aircraft completely. No! The beam of light that tore through the night sky did not hit the transport aircraft. The moment before it was about to hit the transport aircraft, it was blocked by something unknown. From the porthole on the right, the captain could see that the light of death was so dazzling and terrifying. But under the cover of this terrifying light of death, the transport aircraft that should have been destroyed in the air was lucky enough to escape from the shadow of death and quickly rose higher into the sky. That's a lion!" All of a sudden, the co-pilot exclaimed, "Lion, it's him!" The beam of light that tore through the night sky disappeared quietly, unable to stop the transport aircraft that was flying higher and higher. In the night sky, only the lion that suddenly appeared and blocked the beam of light was left. In the night sky, where the moonlight was like a veil and there was still a hint of energy reaction, a steel lion with snow-white armor, black translucent goggles, mane as sharp as blades, limbs with conspicuous red joints slowly moving, and carrying two uniquely shaped blades on its back, was stepping on stairs condensed from faint light, one step at a time as it stepped into the dark city invaded by the ancient doom ritual. Below it was the swaying, flickering red light and the black servant army that was constantly surging. And behind these servant army, in the depths of the dark city, was the mastermind behind the beam cannon that almost killed the transport aircraft on the spot. The pure white lion descended from the night sky and stepped onto the roof of the tallest building within 1,000 meters. Looking down, it raised its head and roared. Chapter 743. Under the night sky. The scene of the white lion descending onto Carpentaria was witnessed by all the Lars and Horn soldiers who had yet to fall asleep. And McKillis was one of them. Furthermore, he woke up faster than the other people who were shocked by the scene caused by the snow-white lion. Bridge. Attack. It's time to reclaim the periphery of Carpentaria. This was an opportunity. A greeting gift from Ray Minkai. A greeting gift from afar? That's not simple. Night. From the beginning to the end, McKillis never took the initiative to contact Ray Minkai, nor did he receive any communication from Ray Minkai. Both sides seemed to be in a state of high tacit understanding. They both believed that the other could see through their thoughts and cooperate accordingly. And now, with the white lion stepping into Carpentaria from the sky in such a high-profile manner, it undoubtedly provided the best cover for Lars and Horn's next attack. At McGillis's order, the mothership of the mixed fleet issued an attack order that had been arranged in advance, fully activating the Gallahorn mixed fleet that had gathered here. In the blink of an eye, the siren that signified the start of the battle resounded throughout the Gulf of Carpentaria. As searchlights lit up one after another, Glaze's troops, whose armor still had traces of the battle during the day, and the mobile engineer troops activated one after another. They charged into the Dark City according to their assigned mission. At the same time, the fleet station in the Gulf of Carpentaria also launched a new round of firepower support. Thanks to the appearance of the transport plane, the central area that they had been unable to explore during the day finally revealed a corner of the veil. No matter what else was hidden in the central area of Carpentaria, the mixed fleet of Lars and Horn knew one fact. There was at least one MA that was suspected to be similar to the MA Hammonds. Such a high-value target was definitely worth the fleet's expenditure of ammunition to suppress it in the city center, preventing it from rushing out of Carpentaria and hindering the next attack. The cannons roared, and a series of flames lit up the dark city, plunging it into a new round of fire. And amidst the splashes of flames, missiles with long tails of flames flew across the sky, covering the city center where the MA might be hiding. Rumble, rumble, the explosion of the cannons. The whine of the missiles tearing through the night sky. It actually suppressed the roar of the white lion. This made State Zero shake his head in displeasure. These bastards, they really know how to loot a burning house. State Zero turned around and bared his sharp teeth at the defense line where the mixed fleet was located. Then, he jumped again and charged into the dense crowd of Blue Man's servants from the top of the building. Roar! Wong! The roar. The blade vibrated, and the sound of the enemy's body was like thunder, wave after wave, without stopping. Looking down from the sky, the swaying black wave with red spots of light was being split apart by a snow-white arrow. It did not stop the advance of the black wave at all. It could only use its body to block the footsteps of the white lion as it charged towards the city center of Carpentaria. Golden sharp teeth, golden sharp claws, the two long swords on its back. Even the hair on its head was like a blade. It turned the rapidly charging snow-white lion into a terrifying killing machine. As long as it was an enemy that blocked the white lion's advance, it would always be bitten, torn, or even stomped to death in various ways. The seemingly terrifying number of Blumen's army, which filled every corner of the city, was actually so fragile. That lion, it's so powerful. Taking advantage of the gap between the fleet's firepower support, The reconnaissance aircraft that was waiting for an opportunity to take off also came to the area where the White Lion was. It naturally saw the White Lion as if it was playing, easily breaking through the blockade of Blumen's army, and went straight to the city center. Hawkeye 1, report the information you saw. At this moment, McGillis's voice was transmitted to the reconnaissance aircraft that was watching the White Lion. Yes, reporting to the commander. The lion that suddenly landed in Carpinteria has broken through the enemy's defense line and is getting closer and closer to the city center. I believe that it won't be long before the lion comes into contact with the enemy's main force. McGillis's voice made the pilot of the reconnaissance aircraft very excited. Is that so? Thank you for your hard work. Please pay attention to your safety. Don't get too close to the city center. McGillis could hear the pilot's excitement, but he did not dwell on it too much. Compared to the loyal subordinates of the Yethu family and the Kazan family, the soldiers under McGillis's command were already considered normal. McGillis's gaze moved and fell on the street that was constantly lit up by explosions. That was the place where the White Lion was breaking through the defense line. With such a high-profile and arrogant action, the steel lion that was stepping in the air would soon become the focus of this battlefield. Boom! Boom! The huge parachute was thrown down, and the perfectly landing Gauda Barbados immediately raised the folding smoothbore cannon on his right arm and fired at the incoming Blumen's servant army. In the roaring cannon fire, a dazzling spark suddenly exploded among the Blumen's servant army, bringing up countless pieces of debris. Buzz! Then Gauda Barbados lowered his body and fully unleashed the thrust of the thruster on his back. With this explosive force, he charged like lightning to the front of the enemy that was disrupted by the cannon fire. He repeatedly waved the hammer sword in his left hand and swept back and forth among the Blumen's servant army like he was harvesting wheat. Bang! 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 The sound of the hammer sword hitting the black Blumen's body was endless, like the sound of heavy drums alternating with each other. Every time there was an explosion, one or two Blumans would be sent flying. At first glance, Gauda Barbados' attack was indeed powerful, but the number of Blumen's servant army blocking it was too shocking. Even if Gauda Barbados could destroy a few Blumen with each attack, it was only a small part of the huge number of Blumen. It didn't have any effect at all. As long as Gauda Barbados continued to tangle with the black Blumen that were surging like a flood, Gauda Barbados and 3 sons and moons might be exhausted to death. TSK, there are too many of them. 3 sons and moons saw through this and frowned slightly. Then he piloted Gauda Barbados to quickly retreat, tried to increase the distance between them and the Blumen's servant army in the shortest amount of time. Boom! Boom! While retreating quickly, Gauda Barbados continued to raise the folding smoothbore in his right hand under 3 suns and moon's control and fired a few rounds at the buildings on the left and right sides. As the shells exploded, the buildings that were hit fell to the side, causing smoke and dust to cover the entire street temporarily. It also temporarily stopped the Blumen's servant army that was chasing Gauda Barbados, turning around, jumping, and leaving quickly. This set of actions was done in one go, without any hesitation. At the same time, as 3 suns and moons piloted Gauda Barbados to break away from the pursuit, they were also constantly looking for traces of the Snow White Lion. According to the plan that the 2 of them had made before landing, there should be a rendezvous point north of Gauda Barbados' current position. As long as they reached there and sent out a signal flare, Ray Minkai and State Zero would rush over to rendezvous, break through the enemy's blockade, and rush into the city center. Your Excellency, have we arrived? While jumping, Gauda Barbados landed on the roof of a 15-story building and was searching the surroundings. As expected, the street leading to the center of the city had become the most eye-catching area of the entire battlefield. Black Blumen's servant army, White Mob Bahrain, the 2 joined forces and tried to stop the Snow White Lion's advance. Buzz! Buzz! The blazing beam of light pierced through the building from the southeast to the west and went straight behind the Snow White Lion, trying to skewer the Snow White Lion from the back to the front, killing it without caring about burying it. Roar! The snow-white lion that was enraged by the sneak attack roared again and again. After slapping the surrounding blue man's servants away, it actually used the surrounding buildings as footholds to avoid the beam of light and rushed to the sky above Ma Barain, who had ambushed it. Then, it was a claw technique that fell from the sky. A sharp claw that burst out with a cold light pierced into Ma Barain's head without any hindrance and went straight for the reaction furnace below his head. This set of actions was done in one go, as fast as lightning, and did not give Ma Barain any time to breathe. Poor Ma Barain had just shot out that beam of light when it was slapped by the snow-white lion. Boom! The huge explosion drowned more than half of the street. Whether it was the snow-white lion or the black blue man, they could not escape being drowned by the terrifying explosion caused by Ma Barain's suicide. At this moment, the buildings in the center of the explosion collapsed, and the streets collapsed. Even the area a few streets away could not escape the destruction of the terrifying shockwave caused by this explosion. The glass shattered everywhere. The street lamps were instantly uprooted. The concrete paved road collapsed and scattered. Above that miserable state, a huge mushroom cloud appeared in the sky. This scene made Lars Horn's troops, who were finally able to rush into the outer city and begin to sweep the enemy, dumbfounded. This was a terrifying scene that rarely happened since the Calamity Sacrifice. After the destruction of the human enemy AI army, Lars Horn, who had the top combat strength of the human race, had not encountered an enemy worthy of fighting with all his strength for a long time. Therefore, the shockwave that destroyed several blocks in an instant had fiercely refreshed the understanding of war of the current generation of Gjallarhorn pilots. Roar! Under the huge mushroom cloud, a roar shook the sky, as if announcing its victory, constantly stirring the rolling mushroom cloud. The roar of victory shook the sky, but it did not scare the enemy away. Above the wreckage covered in smoke and dust, a cold red light once again lit up. It was the Black Blue Man's servant army. This mechanical army, who did not know whether they were alive or dead, treated the corpse as nothing and continued to trample on the wreckage that was full of bomb craters, swarming forward. Once again, from all directions, the snow-white lion, who was in the center of the explosion, was unscathed. Under the black wave, the snow-white lion, who was stepping on Ma Barain's broken head, showed a trace of human-like disdain in its eyes. It seemed to be very disdainful of the enemies that came from all directions and surrounded it with an inescapable net. Roar! The heavy low roar was a unified attack launched by the black wave. In a one-on-one battle, the large-caliber assault cannon equipped by Blue Man could not hurt the long-toothed lion at all. But now, there were at least hundreds of Blue Man's servant army surging forward like a tide. Their cannonballs almost covered the sky above the snow-white lion, as well as the range of movement that it could move. In the blink of an eye, the thunderous cannonballs and flames had already cut off the mushroom cloud. The momentum was extremely terrifying. Looking at the world, there was probably no MS, no pilot with enough performance and ability to escape from this terrifying barrage, right? But the long-toothed lion and Ray Minkai were not afraid of this barrage that almost destroyed all life. Roar! The snow-white lion raised its right front paw, and the power of the lambda drive system was instantly activated. The unknown force field, which was enough to block all physical phenomena, once again enveloped the snow-white lion, guarding the last checkpoint, allowing the monstrous barrage to pour down on the snow-white lion. At this moment, the shock wave between heaven and earth had not subsided, and the terrifying barrage of the Blue Man's servant army followed one after another, resounding in the sky above Carpentaria. Lars Horn's troops, who had just escaped the shock wave, once again focused their attention on the area where the earth-shattering explosion had just erupted, followed by such a terrifying attack. However, just as their gazes landed on that area, a burst of dazzling light suddenly erupted, overshadowing the momentum created by the rumbling cannon fire that was like rolling thunder. The light that was like the rising sun disappeared in a flash, and the world fell into a dead silence. Then, the rumbling sound was louder, more roaring, and more shocking than the previous rumbling cannonballs, igniting the world. Rumble, this terrifying commotion, which sounded like thunder from the nine heavens, was the shocking commotion caused by the explosion of all of Blue-Man's servants who had just created an inescapable net by firing in unison and swore to kill the Snow-White Lion. Perhaps in this battlefield, no one had ever imagined that such a scene would occur. In just a short moment, the hundreds of Blue-Man's servant army were destroyed at the same time, without a second's difference. The culprit that caused such a terrifying scene was the Snow-White Lion that stood proudly above the burning sea of fire, using the Blue-Man's servant army as fuel. Above the burning steel wreckage was M.A. Hammonds that had appeared out of nowhere. No, although the outline of the body was very similar to the M.A. Hammonds that Ray Minkai was familiar with, in terms of size and details, the enemy that appeared in front of him was far bigger than M.A. Hammonds, and also seemed to be more oppressive. Chapter 744. Another new one? Hey, Kai. The enemies in this world have so many tricks up their sleeves. State Zero's fighting spirit was high as he stared straight at the new enemy that appeared on top of the wreckage. After all, it is a disaster that almost wiped out the human race. Ray Minkai was also a little surprised, but after thinking about it, he did not feel that there was anything wrong. Putting aside the resurrected ancient doomed sacrifice, the figure of the Destiny Counselor that appeared behind the scenes was enough to explain the endless new tricks in front of him. In this world, only the Destiny Counselor would come up with such a messy plan. State Zero, do you feel anything? Ray Minkai glanced at the huge MA that flew on top of the wreckage of the Blue Man's servant army and asked thoughtfully, No, it's just that there's a disgusting smell. State Zero lowered his head slightly, and his front body was even lower. This was a sign that he was about to launch an attack. State Zero also understood Ray Minkai's thoughts, but just by feeling, it was impossible to figure out the enemy's real situation. The way to quickly grasp the enemy's real situation was to force the enemy to reveal more of his trump cards in the midst of a fierce battle. Do it! Roar! A faint light flashed under the Snow-White Lion's feet, and the huge mechanical beast suddenly flew up from the ground like a cannonball and headed straight for the huge MA that was floating on top of the wreckage of the Blue Man's servant army. Zila! Boom! At the same time, the moment the Snow-White Lion leaped up, the huge MA opened its sharp jaws at the same time and shot out a terrifying beam that could instantly penetrate a building that was at least 15 stories high. This was no doubt an attack that had been prepared for a long time. Perhaps when the Snow-White Lion used the powerful power of the Lambda Drive system to kill hundreds of Blue Man's servants in one fell swoop with a defensive counterattack strategy. This one finally couldn't hold back, and a huge MA that appeared from behind the scenes also calculated the most effective attack method at present. The high-temperature beam that could instantly melt steel armor tore through the sky with a rumbling sound and hit the Snow-White Lion that leaped up without any delay. In an instant, a dazzling small sun rose from the ravaged land again. Rumble. The blazing shock wave continued to shake the air. The rumbling sound reverberated in the center of the city, which was filled with broken walls and dilapidated buildings. They became the coordinates that guided Gouda and Barbados to this place. That is M.A. And your lion? On the west side of the area where the Snow-White Lion and the huge M.A. were fighting, Gouda Barbados, who had been searching all the way, finally came to this area. However, just as Three Sun Moon was about to help the White Lion, his sharp intuition told him that something was wrong. There seems to be something over there. At first, she thought it was just her imagination. However, the information she received from her Alea consciousness system proved that her intuition was correct. Thus, the Three Suns and Moons changed their minds. From supporting the Snow-White Lion, he followed his intuition and searched for the strangeness hidden behind the scenes of this battlefield. On a deeper level, the Three Suns and Moons felt that the key to ending this battle was to find out the strangeness behind the scenes. Boom! The terrifying beam of light swept across, piercing through two buildings that were lucky enough to survive the previous explosion and hit the Snow-White Lion directly. However, it was still unable to move forward even half a step. Even under the bombardment of this beam of light, at least several buildings had been penetrated and collapsed, but it was still unable to break through the shimmering barrier in front of the Snow-White Lion. "It's quite fierce." State Zero bared his sharp teeth and smiled proudly. "Be careful. This guy may be analyzing the Lambda drive system." Ray Minkai was very cautious. He was very clear that when fighting with an enemy dominated by AI programs, he must end the battle quickly. Otherwise, the longer the time, the more likely the AI enemy will analyze the weakness and destroy it in one fell swoop. "Ayo, understood." State Zero roared happily. The Snow-White Lion moved and disappeared from the shooting axis of the huge MA in the blink of an eye. The moment the target was lost, the huge MA's fire control program did not seem to react. It was not until the beam blocked by the Lambda drive system's force field destroyed a building in the distance without any hindrance that the huge MA realized the disappearance of the Snow-White Lion. But at this time, it was already a step too late. The white figure was like a ghost, swaying on the ruins full of wreckage. In the blink of an eye, it crossed the safe distance that was tightly controlled by the huge MA's beam cannon from the beginning and went straight to the left side of the huge MA. Looking at the huge MA that was half a second behind, it just turned its sharp head and noticed its huge MA. State Zero grinned. In the form of Sot's mechanical beast, State Zero's so-called grin only made him look more ferocious and fierce. "Pah!" The air exploded with a roar. It was a tail whip. The huge MA that was very similar to Hammond's found that the Snow-White Lion rushed to its side. It swung its tail whip at the Snow-White Lion fiercely. But unexpectedly, this attack was already seen through by the Snow-White Lion. The pair of blades on the Snow-White Lion's back quickly crossed and swung out. The tail whip that came rushing over was broken on the spot and fell to the ground powerlessly. Roar! The tail whip was cut down, and a meaningless but extremely strange scream suddenly sounded. It was as if the huge MA was stimulated by the pain caused by the broken tail whip and was about to fall into madness. However, this was just a human's illusion. Just as the dust of the tail whip fell to the ground, two beams of light lit up on both sides of the huge MA that was injured and retreating without warning. And with the speed of lightning, the Snow-White Lion that was about to swing his sword to chase the huge MA was drowned on the spot. Sneak attack. Ayo! How can this group of AI use these messy methods? The moment it was drowned by the beam of light, State Zero's roar sounded again and again. State Zero, step back. Raymond Kai's voice just fell, and the Snow-White Lion just pushed back. A gust of wind followed, and one of the killers that ambushed the Snow-White Lion on the left and right sides of the huge MA was knocked to the ground on the spot. "Caught you guys." At the same time, the voice of three suns and moons also came from the communication channel. "Kid, you finally came." State Zero's gaze was fixed. Naturally, he found out the identity of the person who set off the sound of wind and knocked down the ambushers. In the fading beam of light, M.A. Bahrain that had its head pierced by a sword and hammer fell to the ground. It was one of the two M.A.s that ambushed the Snow-White Lion. The other M.A. Bahrain, together with the huge M.A., pulled apart the distance and confronted the Snow-White Lion. "Yes, I'm here. Just now, I noticed that the two big guys wanted to ambush you, so I waited for a while." What three suns and moons noticed just now was the two M.A. Bahrain ambushing on both sides of the huge M.A. Taking advantage of the moment when the two M.A. Bahrain ambushed the Snow-White Lion, three suns and moons drove Gauta Barbados to a mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. In terms of results, it was not bad. Is it? Good job. Ray Minkai glanced at the M.A. Bahrain that fell to the ground after being penetrated by the sword and hammer, and looked at the side of the huge M.A. The tactical failure, I am afraid, has become an opportunity for the huge M.A. to retreat. At the moment when Gauta Barbados and the Snow-White Lion met, the huge MA and MA Bahrain quietly pulled apart a distance again. It seems that they continue to fight with their own powerful firepower advantage. But the movement from not far behind the Snow White Lion has completely beaten the drum of retreat of the huge MA. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It was still a beam cannon. At the moment when the movement from behind the Snow White Lion became louder and louder, the huge MA and MA Bahrain burst out the beam cannons at the same time, once again sweeping towards the Snow White Lion and Gauda Barbados. This attack was not to kill the Snow White Lion and Gauda Barbados, but to use a distraction shot to quickly evacuate. In a unique, ear-piercing roar, when the Ahab furnace burst out, the two MA Bahrain flew up one after another, taking advantage of the Snow White Lion and Gauda Barbados dodging the beam attack, quickly turned around and retreated towards the city on the east side of Carpentaria. Roar. Don't think about escaping. When State Zero saw that the enemy wanted to run, he naturally wanted to chase after them. State Zero. Wait. Don't chase. Ray Minkai stopped State Zero's action in time. Woo. Che. Forget it. State Zero let out an unintelligible whimper from his throat, then laid down on the pile of wreckage. Bored out of his mind, he slapped the Mambalin back and forth, using Barbados' sword as a punching bag to vent his anger. When the three suns and moons saw that the long-toothed lion State Zero no longer pursued the huge MA Bahrain, he also stopped his action, allowing Gauda Barbados to stand beside the long-toothed lion State Zero, waiting for the next order to come. Behind this wreckage, the MS team sent by Lars Horn finally arrived. The moon set and the sun rose. At the moment when the battlefield that took place in the night was once again illuminated by the sun, the soldiers of Lars Horn who cleaned up the battlefield were surprised to find that in this big city occupied by the ancient doomed sacrifice, except for the broken walls damaged by the battle and the wreckage of MA all over the western city, there were no other remains other than those of Lars Horn's landing force. McGillis, who received the relevant report, frowned deeply. This phenomenon was really strange. In the 10 hours since the beginning of the landing battle, the mixed fleet led by McGillis took in at least thousands of local residents and some of the allies who were scattered because of the ancient doom sacrifice's invasion. According to what these people said, when the ancient disaster sacrifice invaded, it would be like the legends from hundreds of years ago. It would slaughter all humans within its sight and would not let go of any human who still had signs of life. But with the help of the long-toothed lion State Zero and Gauda Barbados, when they successfully occupied the western city, the soldiers of Lars Horn who cleaned up the battlefield found information that was very inconsistent with the information provided by the survivors. What happened to this city? McGillis thought for a while, then brought this information to the temporary NACU that was specially prepared for the long-toothed lion State Zero and Gauda Barbados. McGillis, who walked down from the vehicle, saw Gauda Barbados standing in the middle of the NACU, waiting for the arrival of the preparation personnel to start a new round of preparation, as well as the big and small figures beside them. The big one was a very familiar Snow White Lion. It was unexpectedly lying on a pile of rocks of unknown origin that looked very hard. The huge, bloody mouth opened and closed, biting at least 10 stones and chewing back and forth. The small one was a pilot named Three Sun and Moon August. He was sitting quietly beside the pile of stones, methodically taking out chocolates from his pocket, carefully peeling off the wrapper, and slowly chewing them in his mouth. Although the big and small pair looked very strange, the lion and Three Sun and Moon's behavior was the same. "Excuse me, where's Sir Ray Minkai?" McGillis had seen State Zero before, but it was the first time he saw State Zero lying on a pile of cherry stones and eating heartily. Surprised, McGillis used his strong psychological quality to accept this scene, which was different from the inherent impression humans had of lions. State Zero, who was chewing on the cherry stones, raised its head slightly and glanced at McGillis. It raised its paw and pointed at the room beside it, then waved its paw at McGillis in disdain. Its meaning was self-evident. It wanted McGillis to go away quickly and not disturb it from enjoying its meal. Such a human-like behavior made McGillis stunned for a moment. McGillis forgot about his intention to chat with Three Sun and Moon August. He instinctively followed State Zero's guidance and found Ray Minkai, who was looking at a map and thinking. This is the map of Oceania. Are you thinking about your next move? McGillis couldn't help but ask after glancing at the map that made Lay Minkai fall into deep thought. Oh, it's Duke Farid. Please have a seat. I was just thinking about some things and was lost in thought. No, I'm the one who interrupted your thoughts. Also, you can just call me by my name. You don't have to be so formal. Also, I haven't personally thanked you for your help last time. The help McGillis was talking about was probably the battle he put on for Galio on the snowy plains, right? However, looking at the current situation of Lars Horn's headquarters, that act didn't seem to be of much use. No, that was just something I did casually. It wasn't enough to reach the apex. Ray Minkai waved his hand and didn't want to continue on this topic. Sir McGillis, are you here because of this strange phenomenon in this city? If the mixed fleet led by McGillis and Lars Horn could discover it, so could Ray Minkai. When State Zero landed on the west side of the city, the strange phenomenon hidden behind the fierce battle was detected by State Zero. In this city, other than the refugees who were lucky enough to escape the ancient Doom sacrifice invasion and were taken in by the mixed fleet of Lars Horn and Lars Horn's troops who launched the landing battle, there were probably no other living people. Even the signs of the massacre described by the survivors weren't found in the west side of the city. The so-called massacre seemed to be an illusion created by the survivors when they were in danger. Sir, what do you mean? Ray Minkai didn't answer McGillis' question. His gaze was still on the map hanging on the wall. It was different from Ray Minkai's memory, but there was still a huge crater in the southeast of Oceania that had swallowed several cities. There was no information about it in Ray Minkai's memory, only a sentence about it. Chapter 745. When the sun set again, the reconnaissance aircraft hovering over Carpentaria also slowly landed on the mothership of Lars Horn's mixed fleet. They reported the information they had collected during the day one by one. Amidst the continuous compilation of intelligence, a piece of joyous news was gradually being analyzed by the intelligence personnel. The ancient Doom sacrifice entrenched in the city of Carpentaria was likely to have begun to retreat. Once this information was analyzed, it was placed on McGillis' desk. McGillis looked at his subordinates, who were trying to maintain a serious expression, but there was a trace of joy in their eyes. McGillis did not show a victorious smile, as his subordinates expected. Instead, his gaze continued to fall on an ancient map that he sent people to dig out from the database of Lars Horn's headquarters. It was an ancient map that had already turned yellow. The edges and even the center of the map had traces of burns. Judging from the outline described on the map, this should be a map of Oceania, which was the continent that was being invaded by the ancient Doom sacrifice. It was not difficult to see that this ancient map once recorded the most complete time of Oceania. The southeast side of Oceania was still intact. There was also a prosperous economic circle established by the city that had not yet disappeared. However, all of this was destroyed in the Doom Sacrifice War 300 years ago. Even though McGillis was able to find a record of the disappeared city from the database of Lars Horn's headquarters, he could no longer find the secrets of the city. Everything was covered up by the calamity sacrificial war 300 years ago. This also proved Ray Minkai's previous speculation. The ancient Doom sacrifice that had revived from the dust of history and even extended its tentacles to the broken moon might no longer be the cold machine controlled by a ruthless and cold killing program 300 years ago. Instead, there was a pair of hands controlling these killing machines behind the scenes. On one hand, the flames of war were ignited around the world, and even in the Earth-Moon circle. On the other hand, they mysteriously used killing to cover up some things that did not see the light of day. If the former, McGillis, and even Lars Horn's headquarters could be explained by the killing program of the ancient Doom sacrifice, then the latter was a question that needed to be verified immediately. After returning from Ray Minkai's place, McGillis had used the communication network of Lars Horn's headquarters to gather information on a global scale. Although the other theaters of operations did not make as much progress as the mixed fleet of McGillis and Lars Horn, they still found some clues. In particular, there were clues similar to those in the city of Carpinteria. Combining all the information, McGillis couldn't help but agree with Ray Ming Kai's speculation. Those merciless machines were slaughtering humans to cover up some things. Something that could very well affect the situation of the battlefield. Send this information to His Excellency Ray Ming Kai. McGillis, who finally came to a conclusion, handed the summarized information to his subordinates and asked them to send it to Ray Ming Kai. Then he closed his eyes. No one knew what he was calculating, or he was closing his eyes to relieve the fatigue caused by overuse of his brain. The subordinates did not suspect him, but they quickly followed McGillis's instructions and personally delivered the information to Ray Ming Kai. A few days ago, the performance of Ray Ming Kai and Lion Zero could be said to have conquered all the soldiers of Lars Horn who participated in the attack and defense of Carpinteria. And the subordinate who personally delivered the information to Ray Ming Kai happened to be one of the pilots who piloted Grays that day and personally faced the strange Grays. Wearing the uniform of Lars Horn, the subordinate with a serious face stood in front of a Naku that was divided for Ray Ming Kai and the three suns and moons. From the wide-open warehouse door, one could directly see Gao de Barbados, who was surrounded by many members of the maintenance team. It was not the training squad provided by Gallahorn's mixed fleet for Gundam Barbados, but an exclusive training squad that had been specially transferred from Abreu's territory. Although they were wearing Abreu's uniform and their IDs were guaranteed by Abreu's officials, as a trusted aide who had followed McGillis for a period of time, this subordinate already knew that they were merely Divaz subordinates who were wearing Abreu's official clothing. "Excuse me, is His Excellency Ray Ming Kai here?" There were various thoughts in his mind, but the subordinate was still very clear about the task he had to complete. "His Excellency Ray Ming Kai? Oh, he's over there." What made the subordinate frown was that when the other party saw the uniform of Lars Horn on his body, his expression was not very good, and there was even a sense of alienation in his tone. Moreover, the other party did not give the subordinate a chance to speak. He just turned around and left, as if avoiding the legendary god of plague. What made the subordinate even more concerned was that the surrounding gazes became a little sharp as the person left. The preparation work that should have been busy quietly slowed down, and a faintly discernible gaze that seemed to carry a trace of malice was cast towards his subordinates. "What are you all doing? Hurry up and get to work. If you neglect the preparation of Barbados and cause the three suns and moons to lose in the battle, I won't forgive you." Right then, a dark-skinned, burly man with a big beard on his face shouted in a hoarse voice, drawing everyone's attention back. This made McGillis's subordinates let out a sigh of relief. "You're the subordinate of that Mike something? His Excellency Ray Ming Kai is waiting for you inside." The man walked to the front, looked up and down, and gestured to the room inside. "Understood." The subordinate nodded, then said, "Thank you very much. No need. Hurry up and go in. If you stay here, those little bastards won't obediently work." The storm passed just like that. Before the subordinate who passed through Naku and came to Ray Ming Kai's room to speak, he was stunned by Ray Ming Kai, who suddenly called out his name. Rakdong Kamish?" The subordinate who did not expect to be called by Ray Ming Kai was stunned for a moment, then nodded silently. "Yes, I'm Rakdong Kamish. His Excellency Ray Ming Kai. It really is you, McGillis' right-hand man." Ray Ming Kai seemed to have something to say, but he changed his mind at the last moment. "Forget it. McGillis called you over. It's probably about the giant pit in the south, right?" Rakdong's expression changed slightly. Then he handed over the document McGillis ordered to Ray Ming Kai with both hands. "Yes, the commander just finished reading this report and asked me to bring it over." Ray Ming Kai raised his hand and took it. He did not say anything, nor did he pay attention to Rakdong. Instead, he opened the document and carefully read it. Seeing this, Rakdong did not ask anything, nor did he turn around to leave. He stood there quietly like a stone man, waiting for Ray Minkai's next words. Although he was only recently promoted by McGillis to work beside him, Rakdong knew that McGillis was now waiting for Ray Minkai's conclusion. The battle to take back Carpentaria still needed Ray Minkai to make the final decision. Time slowly ticked by. Rakdong was not too sure how long Ray Minkai had been reading the report. That document was only a few pages long, but it was like the most difficult book to understand. It was worth Ray Minkai's time to read it. As the pure white moonlight shone through the open window, Ray Minkai finally closed the thin document. It's done. Rakdong, go back and tell McGillis. Tomorrow I will go south. Go south. Rakdong was shocked. Although the recapture of Carpentaria was already set in stone, outside of Carpentaria's territory, there might still be ancient doomed sacrificers roaming around, constantly hunting humans. Under such circumstances, if he left the main force and acted alone, wouldn't the risk be, yes, go south? Ray Minkai nodded and handed the document to Rakdong. I still can't let go of the giant pit in the south. Perhaps only by seeing the current situation of the giant pit with my own eyes can I decide what to do next. Ray Minkai said the most unbelievable thing in the calmest tone. From the south of Carpentaria to the giant pit that left a huge gap in Oceania, the straight line distance was more than 2,000 kilometers. If it was in peacetime, this distance might not be much. But today, in the interior of Oceania, there were likely to be countless ancient doomed sacrificers wandering around. Thinking of this, Rakdong suddenly thought of the day he sat in Gray's cockpit and witnessed the battle. With such amazing combat power, even if it went south alone, there might not be many ancient doomed sacrificers that could pose a threat to it. However, how should Rakdong convey Ray Minkai's decision to McGillis? Rakdong, you don't have to think too much. All you need to do is repeat my decision. If there are any difficulties, 3 Remoon and Babados can stay and assist in the next battle. At this point, Rakdong no longer had any power or qualification to dissuade Ray Minkai. All he could do was to bring this decision back to McGillis. Is that so? Since Your Excellency wants to go south, then let's start preparing. What surprised Rakdong was that McGillis' decision seemed to want to follow behind Ray Minkai and lead the troops to go south directly to the giant pit. McGillis actually made such a crazy decision without blinking. Under the curtain of the night, waves of the sea, under the scattered moonlight, circulated this unchanging law, crashing against the beach and the reefs, continuing the eternal battle between water and stone. On this beach, with the constant sound of waves, a beautiful figure walked in it, not caring about the cold and bone-chilling sea water that covered her smooth feet over and over again in the middle of the night. Beach, moonlight, waves, the beauty walking in it outlined a beautiful scene under the starry sky at this moment. Miss L, I didn't expect you to be so interested in walking under this beautiful starry sky. The beautiful scene didn't last long before it was broken by an uninvited voice. I didn't expect the man who inherited the title of emperor to be such an unromantic person. The beautiful figure walking on the beach stopped and looked at the forest on the edge of the beach without sadness or joy. No, I'm not an emperor. I'm just an ordinary person who was involved in this nightmare at an unfortunate time. Under the white moonlight, a black-haired young man walked out of the forest with a meaningful smile, came to 3 meters in front of the beautiful figure, and bowed slightly. Nice to meet you. Salute to the fellow member of the Parliament of Destiny. Miss L. The beautiful figure called Miss looked at the black-haired young man who appeared in front of her and found that the new member was not much different from before. Then she slowly nodded. Nice to meet you. I'm Lamia Labrise, and I'm also a member of the Parliament of Destiny, Miss L. Your Majesty the Emperor. The conversation with the reversed tone seemed to make the black-haired young man a little embarrassed. But he also knew that among the many members of the Parliament of Destiny, the woman in front of him who claimed to be Lamia Labrise and didn't care about her true identity being revealed could be said to be the only one, whether it was her own strength or her position in the Parliament of Destiny. Miss L. You don't have to call me Your Majesty the Emperor. You can just address me as Mr. K, he said. Miss. After Lamia and the black-haired young man looked at each other, they obediently accepted this request. Mr. K, how far have you progressed with your plan? After greeting each other, Lamia no longer talked nonsense and chose to go straight to the point. It's going well. The target has accepted our kindness. Now, it's time to see the results of the final stage. The black-haired young man nodded, then moved his gaze and looked at the sea behind the beautiful figure. No, maybe it's not the sea. Hundreds of years ago, on the seemingly endless sea, there was a prosperous city built by humans. However, it had turned into nothingness in that shocking change. It had been replaced by this seemingly calm, but actually concealed danger on the surface of the sea. Although it's a bit overboard, I'm curious as to why Miss personally came to this world as the right-hand man of the speaker. If it's just to recover that thing, I'm enough. Isn't that right? No, not enough. Fortunately, Lamia didn't keep the things hidden under the sea behind her secret. Or rather, the person standing in front of her was also a member of the Parliament of Destiny. It was only a matter of time before the secret under the sea was made public. That's the key to all the next actions of the Parliament. For this, since the beginning of the speaker, the Parliament has worked for more than 10 years before the day of harvest arrived. Chapter 746. What was under the surface of the sea? Was it worth the right-hand woman of the Parliament of Destiny, Lamia Labrise, to personally come here and wait for that thing to break out of the egg? The black-haired boy's eyes flashed with a trace of inquiry. At the end of the day, the reason why he was able to successfully find his sister who was separated from Emperor Lucius V. Britannia among the countless worlds was because of the thing that the Parliament of Destiny had hidden beneath the surface of the sea. Speaking of which, Mr. K, you have completed one of your original goals. Lamia turned and stared at the calm sea. Her voice was extremely cold. Yes. Thanks to the help of the Parliament, I was able to reunite with my sister, Nunnally. The black-haired boy was not stingy with his gratitude to the Parliament of Destiny and kept praising the woman in front of him who is the right-hand woman of the Parliament of Destiny. You really are not the Emperor. Although their identities, appearances, and genes were exactly the same, the environment in which they grew up was different. Perhaps this is the reason why the former Emperor was killed by you. For some reason, as Lamia's cold voice sounded, the black-haired boy felt a chill down his spine. The other party seemed to be testing him. The woman in front of him. No. It was the person standing behind the woman in front of him who was testing him. The Parliament of Destiny's Parliament of Destiny was testing him. Although it was a little unexpected, it was reasonable. Since the black-haired boy killed himself and inherited everything from him, he fearlessly broke through that path alone and stood on the Parliament of Destiny as the Emperor. The black-haired boy knew that this day would come. However, he did not expect that the Parliament of Destiny would be patient and wait until he and Nunnally reunited before starting to attack. No matter what the reason is, between me and Emperor Lucio, only one can survive. This is a fact that cannot be changed from the beginning. I believe that the Parliament of Destiny who recommended that path to Emperor Lucio is also very clear about this. The counterattack quietly began. It was a path. The path to killing oneself in many parallel universes and seizing one's power was personally recommended to Emperor Lucio by the President of the Parliament of Destiny. This was something that Lamia could not deny or refute. Under such irrefutable evidence, Lamia was silent. Come to think of it, Lars Horn might not be safe anymore. Miss L, I wonder if I can bring Nunnally here. I'll also bring the target's fiancé here. He knew when to stop. The black-haired youth didn't force Lamia too much. Instead, he took a step back and assumed a submissive posture. This step made Lamia nod her head cheerfully. Sure, it just so happens that we have a safety point nearby. Not only your sister and your target's fiancé, but also your partner. It's enough to protect them. Thank you very much. North of Oceania. The city that had calmed the flames of war after the ancient disaster sacrifice had completely retreated was still in a tense but orderly state of preparation for war. The defeat of the ancient disaster sacrifice was obvious to all, but no one dared to believe that the ancient disaster sacrifice would be defeated forever. Humans had only won the first battle after the ancient disaster sacrifice's recovery. To a large extent, this first victory was due to the steel lion that entered the battlefield midway and fought most of the ancient disaster sacrifice's power alone in the city. At this moment, the soldiers of Lars Horn, who had just witnessed the defeat of the ancient disaster sacrifice, had to bid farewell to the steel lion that left Capitalia alone and went south alone. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed since the Long Fong Lion Zero left Capitalia alone and headed south towards the giant pit. As the Long Fong Lion Zero went deeper and deeper into the interior of Oceania, the situation gradually became the same as Ray Minkai had predicted. In the interior of Oceania, the ancient disaster sacrifices activity became more and more frequent. From faintly visible to everywhere to unavoidable. The only way to forcibly break through the encirclement of the ancient disaster sacrifices wandering forces through combat. In less than a day, the Long Fong Lion Zero had already fought with the ancient disaster sacrifice wandering in the interior of Oceania no less than 10 times. Even if those scattered soldiers were nothing to Longhorn Lion Zero, they still appeared frequently, which annoyed Longhorn Lion Zero greatly. The Long Fong Lion Zero's original plan was to use the maximum speed of the Gale equipment to move south in a straight line and rush to the edge of the giant pit in the shortest time possible. TSK. Kai, is there any other way? These flies are very annoying. Taking advantage of the fact that the wandering soldiers nearby had not noticed the movement here, the Long Fong Lion Zero took advantage of the time to mutter to Ray Minkai to choose a new path. There is a way. However, I still have to make you walk on water again. Ray Minkai's method was naturally simple. Since the Long Fong Lion Zero was annoyed by the ancient disaster sacrifice all over the interior, then directly go east to the seaside and go south along the coastline, thus avoiding the wandering ancient disaster sacrifice. But this way, some of Ray Minkai's plans would fall through. Walk on water? Kai, you bastard, didn't you want to attract the enemy's attention from the beginning? The Long Fong Lion Zero was stunned and immediately exposed Ray Minkai's idea. But as soon as the words left his mouth, the Long Fong Lion Zero immediately reacted. Oh, Kai, are you trying to make fun of me? No. You said it yourself. Ray Minkai did want to attract the ancient disaster sacrifice's attention at the beginning and attract the wandering soldiers around, thus creating a loophole in the ancient disaster sacrifice's military network on the continent. Behind this layer of intention, there was a deeper layer of thinking. If these ancient adepts were really as he had guessed, and were causing trouble around the giant pit, or even inside, they would definitely not ignore an enemy like him who was swaggering across the continent and charging straight into the giant pit. I was just complaining. As soon as the holographic image of the Long Fong Lion Zero appeared, it pounced on Ray Minkai's arm and tore it apart. Unfortunately, although the holographic image looked very realistic, it could not cause any harm to Ray Minkai. At most, it would only feel that the Long Fong Lion Zero looked very fierce. Suddenly, Ray Minkai and the Long Fong Lion Zero both looked to the left. That was the direction of the giant pit that swallowed a corner of Oceania. Something's not right. The Long Fong Lion Zero's holographic image suddenly became shaky, as if it was disturbed by something. However, the Long Fong Lion Zero's holographic image was not transmitted over a long distance. It was generated in its own body. Logically speaking, there should not be any interference at all. Let's go. As the Long Fong Lion Zero's holographic image became more and more shaky, Ray Minkai felt that his guess might come true, and the sense of urgency grew stronger. What happened to the giant pit? Illusory and dreamy shadows descended from the void, shrouding the surface of the sea like a veil. It was a very beautiful sight. That is, The sudden appearance of the shadows made the black-haired young man, Lucio, frown slightly. He seemed to be surprised by the sudden appearance of the scene. Maybe the time has come. Lamia, who was standing next to him, said softly. There seemed to be a hint of emotion in her words. At the same time, her gaze was slightly intoxicated as she looked at the dreamy shadows descending from the void. With the appearance of the shadows, the sky that shrouded the sea gradually turned into a bright starry sky with twinkling stars. Above the constantly changing shadows like a veil, the starry sky seemed to have begun to change. Lucio's gaze moved away from the shadows and stared at the starry sky that had already changed. In the beginning, with the knowledge that Lucio obtained from reading books about the starry sky when he was young, he could easily identify every familiar constellation in the starry sky that shrouded the sea above his head. However, before he could identify half of the constellations, the starry sky suddenly changed. In the blink of an eye, the starry sky that Lucio was once familiar with suddenly became distorted. The spectacular constellations were suddenly distorted by some mysterious force, shattered, and no longer had their original appearance. At this moment, the starry sky that Lucio was staring at could be described with the word destroyed. Mr. K, look carefully. This is one of the truths of our Parliament of the End. This is a secret that the former emperor did not know. As the starry sky was distorted, Lamia's voice sounded again, making Lucio's thoughts suddenly stop, and then they began to run frantically. Could it be that under such a coincidence, Lucio, who inherited the name of Mr. K from the emperor, finally took the step that the emperor never took? Lucio's gaze became more and more focused, and his spirit became more and more concentrated as the familiar constellations shattered one by one. The 12 zodiac constellations that the world was familiar with, such as Pegasus, Andromeda, Scorpio, and so on, shattered one after another. The scattered starlight after these constellations shattered magically stayed in the distorted starry sky, neither dissipating nor leaving, as if waiting for something. The starry sky was constantly distorted to a point that even Lucio had never imagined. At the moment of extreme distortion, Lucio even had a feeling that the moment that happened in front of him was not real, but something that could only happen in a dream. Ka! Suddenly, a sound like a tape being cached suddenly sounded, and the distorted starry sky paused. Immediately afterward, the starlight that stayed in the distorted starry sky seemed to have heard some kind of summons, and they drew a magnificent and wonderful trajectory, driving the distorted starry sky to move again. The starlight was bright, and the stars moved. Lucio, who followed the starlight's constantly moving gaze, was shocked to find that the starry sky that appeared in front of him again was no longer the starry sky that he was familiar with. Instead, it was a strange and brand new starry sky full of unknowns. The cautious Lucio did not show his surprise, but threw the question to Lamia. I don't know. What surprised Lucio was that Lamia straightforwardly admitted that she was like him, ignorant of this strange starry sky. Mississippi L, you also don't know about this starry sky? Yes, I don't know about this starry sky. To be more precise, I don't know anything about the appearance of this starry sky. This is just a plan created by Mr. Chairman. I am just an executor. Lucio gradually got used to Lamia's strange self-description that would appear from time to time, but the key point at the moment was not this. What's more, the doubts at the moment had not been solved, and new doubts came one after another. The moment the last strange constellation completely appeared, the distorted starry sky also appeared in front of Lucio with a brand new appearance under the guidance of some kind of power. The sea that was shrouded in light and starlight changed again. Mirror. Unknowingly, the sea's surface had become as flat as a mirror, no longer having the previous ebb and flow of tides and the sound of waves. And in the center of this vast and boundless mirror, where Lucio could not see clearly even if he narrowed his eyes, a faintly discernible figure appeared there. There's a person? Lucio subconsciously touched his pocket, but suddenly stopped. Mr. K, if you want to see, then boldly go and see. Perhaps this is the only opportunity for you to see his true appearance with your own eyes. Him. Lucio was keenly aware of the difference in the words used by Lamia. Yes, him. Lamia smiled softly and no longer said any more information about this him. While thinking, Lucio's right hand that stopped moved again. He took out the electronic telescope from his pocket, took a deep breath, and decisively put it in front of his eyes. While adjusting the magnification, he looked at the figure that appeared in the center of the mirror. Her long gray hair was gently draped over her delicate shoulders. Under the long gray hair was a pretty face that seemed to be immersed in a wonderful dream. Her slender figure was wrapped in a long dress that was sewn with white and soft gauze. The collar and cuffs were decorated with mysterious golden patterns. A woman. Her. The electronic telescope in his hand adjusted the magnification over and over again, so that Lucio could see the figure that appeared in the center of the mirror. But the more he observed, the more mysteries Lucio had in his heart. No matter how he looked at the girl that appeared in the center of the mirror, she did not look like a human who had a clear self-consciousness and could move freely. Rather than saying that it was her, it would be better to say that it was just a girl whose life or death was unknown. What made Lucio even more curious was that the song that gradually resounded throughout the world really came from the direction of the girl. Anna Anifar. This is her identity when she walks in the world. And this song is the song that guides lost travelers to return to their soul's home. Chapter 747. The scorching sun was high in the sky, and there were no clouds for thousands of miles. In the eastern part of Oceania, a fierce chase was unfolding in the mountainous eastern region. It was a chase like that of primitive humans 10,000 years ago, chasing their prey in the wilderness. However, the two parties were not primitive humans who wore animal skins, held bone spears, and chased their prey barefoot. They were also not prey with thick fur that ran everywhere in fear of the hunters. How long are these bastards going to chase? In the mountains, a blue shadow was quickly passing through the valley, rushing through the mountain pass, and entering a relatively flat basin. But behind this azure figure, the pursuing troops of ancient doomed sacrifice and grays were still hot on his heels. Ignore them. Let's continue to speed up. Lei Minkai turned around and glanced at the steel objects that were supposed to be natural enemies. But now they were chasing after him and the long-fanged lion. Then he looked forward again. Time did not allow Ray Minkai and State Zero to turn back and deal with these enemies who were chasing them. On the horizon, behind the mountains, even under the sky, an unknown force field that was huge enough to hold up the sky was formed, completely separating a distant place from this world. Even if they couldn't feel the vicinity of the unknown force field for a while, the spectacular scene formed by the unknown force field, which was enough to shock today's human cognition, made the humans who witnessed its appearance feel terrified and uneasy. Okay, State Zero, who knew that time was no longer on their side, responded, and then burst out with the speed of the Azure Gale equipment. Like a stream of light, they flew through the basin that was not small in size, and completely left the pursuing enemy behind. Ray Minkai had reason to believe that with the super high speed given by the Gale equipment, even if the strange grays mixed in with Ma was strange, they could not catch up with the speed of the Gale long-toothed lion. In fact, this was the case. Looking at the long-toothed lion that turned into a blue stream of light and disappeared at the other end of the basin, the pursuing enemy finally stopped. Whether it was Blue Man's army or the strange grays, they could no longer catch up with the long-toothed lion's footsteps. Damn it, is our justice, the righteousness we seek, going to fail just like that? In the torrent of steel, a strange rustling sound echoed from an airframe named Reginald, which was even larger than the surrounding grays. In the beginning, the voice seemed to be a human voice, but as the conversation progressed, the vague feeling of a human voice completely disappeared. What was left was an extremely hoarse voice synthesized by an inferior synthesis program. State 0. How long will it take to reach there? Even from a distance of nearly 1,000 kilometers, the unknown force field that shrouded this part of the world was still incomparably huge and shocking. If no one obstructs us, we'll be there soon. State 0 wanted to pat his chest and make a promise that it would only take a few hours to get there. But in reality, after passing through this basin, there were still several mountain ranges waiting for the long-toothed lion. Even if the speed of the Tusk Lion Zero style was fast enough, it would still take time to climb the mountain. Can you fly over? This shouldn't be a problem for you now. And then get knocked down by that unknown force field? State 0 snorted. It had thought of the idea proposed by Ray Minkai, but based on its wild intuition, State 0 did not dare to swagger through the air. God knows how many enemies were lurking in the vicinity of that unknown force field. They were already halfway through the journey to the south, and the resistance encountered by the Tusk Lion Zero was getting stronger. If it were not for the high-speed performance of the storm equipment, which made those big birds and strange-looking MS players unable to catch up, they would have already been trapped in an endless battle of attrition. No, my idea is not to break through from a high altitude, but to rely on the cover between the mountains to break through at a low altitude. Ray Minkai spoke his true thoughts. Breaking through from a high altitude without any cover near the unknown force field was bound to be dangerous. But under the cover of the mountains, the Tusk Lion Zero style that broke through at a low altitude with light wings would always be faster than the Tusk Lion Zero style that relied on 4 limbs to run on the ground. Obviously, State 0 understood Ray Minkai's idea. Thus, under the plasma flame thrusters, a pair of light wings quietly formed. Following that, the Tusk Lion Zero style leaped up from the cliff at the side and immediately rose into the air. From a steel beast that roamed between the mountains, it transformed into a stream of light that patrolled between the mountains. Furthermore, observing the unknown force field from the sky was more direct and more oppressive than observing it from the ground. I'm afraid that place no longer belongs to this world. I can't sense the situation inside. The electronic eye of the Longfong Line Zero was constantly shrinking, and the detection function it had was constantly switching modes, trying to detect the truth of the unknown force field from various physical phenomena to life reactions. In the end, it was all in vain. The unknown force field that enveloped the area was like an inanimate object and did not respond to the Tusk Lion Zero style's detection, causing the Tusk Lion Zero style to be unable to see through the unknown force field. Continue approaching. Ray Minkai really wanted to say this, but the obstacle that he predicted appeared. M.A. Hammonds. It was another M.A. Hammonds. It was different from the M.A. Hammonds that was destroyed by the Tusk Lion Zero style in the extreme North Snowfield, leading many of Blumen's servants to block the lion's path. Hammonds, who had surrounded the mountains so tightly that not even a drop of water could pass through, became even bigger and more threatening. The long tail blade had disappeared, and in its place was a missile compartment that was distributed along the spine. On the left and right sides of its shoulders that had become wider, there were 2 rather conspicuous cannons. Judging from their size and style, they looked more like 2 beam cannons with high destructive power. The original claws had disappeared, and from this, it could be inferred that this Hammonds was more used to aerial combat than its predecessor. Boom! The 2 sides met as if they were enemies, and immediately started fighting without exchanging a single word. A beam of light became the bugle call of the battle that took place between the mountains. However, looking at the aggressive attack, the Tusk Lion Zero style did not seem to want to tangle with it. Kai, what do you say? Do you want to do it or not? After sizing up the obstacles, the Tusk Lion Zero style stared at the layer of unknown force field, trying to decipher the secret behind it. Get rid of them. Ray Minkai and the Tusk Lion Zero style's thoughts were connected and instantly made a decision. However, in order to intercept the Tusk Lion Zero style that was swaggering southward, the ancient doomed sacrificers that were hovering around the area used a lot of power to surround the Tusk Lion Zero style. From a bird's eye view, with the Tusk Line Zero style and the ancient doomed sacrificers as the center within a radius of tens of kilometers. The ancient doomed sacrificers were moving rapidly, occupying all the key routes to the unknown force field in the shortest time possible. Just as this large net was about to form above the ninth heaven, a sudden change occurred. A meteor in the daytime suddenly occurred. Fireballs could be clearly seen falling from the ninth heaven towards the ground. The scene at that moment was like the battle of the end of the world described in the myths. In order to restart the world that was full of evil, the high and mighty gods poured down a sea of fire from the abyss onto the human world. Rumble! Under the clear, cloudless sky, the fireball falling from the ninth heaven was so clearly visible that it made people tremble in fear. However, the fireballs falling from the sky were not aimed at the Tusk Line Zero style's location, but at the front, the mountains occupied by the ancient doomed sacrificers. In an instant, as the white trails streaked across the sky and flew over the mountains, an earth-shattering explosion overturned the mountain range on the spot. The deafening sound of the explosion rang out. That was a roar that pierced through the sky. And the meteor that was enough to erase a part of the mountain. In the blink of an eye, the ancient doom sacrificers that blocked the Tusk Line Zero style and did not let it leave were scattered. And the huge M.A. Hammonds was hit by the shockwave and flew down the cliff and was buried by the gravel on the spot. No one knew if it was dead or alive. This is that woman's doing? The Tusk Line Zero style was shocked and subconsciously raised its head to look above the ninth heaven. In its radar, there seemed to be a signal that had not appeared for a long time. It was the identification signal used by the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet. And the appearance of this signal also represented the return of the woman that was once captured by Ray Minkai in the Tusk Line Zero style. In the midst of the fireballs scattered all over the sky, shields used for orbital airborne combat appeared in the fading flames, and a familiar voice was transmitted from the huge orbital airborne force to the Tusk Line Zero style side. This is the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet, Kalta Yet Hugh. Lion Knight, please answer if you can hear me. Hearing this voice, the holographic projection of the Tusk Line Zero raised its beard, and there was a hint of ridicule in its eyes. Look, she came back to give a gift. And with one move, she smashed thousands of asteroid fragments from the ninth heaven. Although these asteroid fragments would not cause drastic changes to the surrounding terrain, the power contained in them was enough to make the ancient doomed sacrificers in front lose half of their power. It was really a touching reunion. The Tusk Line Zero could not help but sigh in his heart, but he did not dare to say it out loud. Ray Minkai naturally did not know how the Tusk Line Zero would describe him in his heart. He only saw that he pondered for a moment, and then responded. This is Ray Minkai. Thank you for the support of the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet. The wind suddenly blew, and shields that protected the Grey Knight troops from the atmospheric burn flew over the Tusk Line Zero styles head at an extremely fast speed and smashed those who were lucky enough to survive the asteroid bombardment and tried to attack the Tusk Line Zero styles servant army into pieces. Boom! The Grey Knight's thrusters started and quickly offset the impact of the last wave of orbital airborne force. The Grey Knight commander driven by Kalta Yethu also came to the side of the Tusk Line Zero style. Unfortunately, the Grey Knight commander did not have the ability to stay in the air for a long time like the Tusk Line Zero style. It was just that, after pausing for a moment beside the Tusk Line Zero style, it landed in the mountains below that were full of holes caused by the asteroid bombardment. No need to thank me. This is what we in Lars Horn should do. Kalta slowly exhaled, and after relieving the burden of the orbital airborne force, he looked up at the Tusk Lion Zero style that spread out its light wings. Lion Knight, leave this to us. Your goal should be that egg, right? Kalta's words made Ray Minkai frown. He did not seem to think that Kalta would call the unknown force field that way. Yes, egg. Looking down from space, that layer of unknown force field that appeared more than 10 hours ago is as round as an eggshell wrapped around something. Eggshell. In an instant, Ray Minkai's mind shook, and a memory that was almost forgotten and had nothing to do with the situation in front of him coincidentally awakened. Egg, unknown force field. It was wrapped up and isolated from the main world, and the situation inside was unknown. All the related words gathered together at this moment, and it reminded Ray Minkai of the work that was once said to be on par with a certain masterpiece, or even surpass the slogan. But the characters, plot, and settings in that work could not have anything to do with the world in front of him. Could it be that it was just a coincidence? The information brought by Kalta made the mystery shrouded in the unknown force field even more confusing. No matter how many guesses Ray Minkai made, the only thing he could do now was to get there as soon as possible and investigate it clearly. Let's go. Lion Knight, leave this place to us, the Earth's outer orbit command fleet. Kalta once again urged Ray Minkai to leave. At the same time, in the sky above this mountain range, the rain of fire that fell from the nine heavens was far from stopping. The scattered fireballs were still falling one after another between the mountains occupied by the ancient doomed sacrifice. This might be the reason why Kalta dared to lead his subordinates and face the ancient doomed sacrifice army alone. No matter how terrifying the ancient doomed sacrifice army was, they would not be able to break through this ultimate killer move made from asteroid fragments in a short period of time, right? Then goodbye. There was no point in saying more. The Type 0 light wings of the long-fanged lion flapped, and it quickly bypassed the edge of the bombardment area covered by asteroid fragments, and went straight to the unknown force field that Kalta called Egg. Looking at the tusked Lion Zero leaving, Kalta took a deep breath and stared at the area that was engulfed by the sea of fire and shrouded by the asteroid fragments. The ancient Doom Ritual's figure could not be stopped and disappeared, and he shouted for his subordinates. Soldiers, listen, this will be the most difficult and dangerous battle for our Earth's outer orbit command fleet. I don't know how many people will survive in the end, but please listen to my request and fight with me until the last moment. Chapter 748. At some point, a song came from the world. A song that seemed to have come from a distant, ancient era was intoxicating and captivating. Every human who heard this song lost all their will to fight. They could only stare blankly at the giant egg that separated this part of the world from this world. What the hell is going on? Three Suns and Moon frowned and looked around. Gretz's third squad, which was cooperating with Gauda Barbados, suddenly stopped and no longer protected Gauda Barbados. If Three Suns and Moon didn't react fast enough, they would have been surrounded by the Mabeline and many Bloomin' servants. The blade cut through the air. Holding the pair of Valkyrie blades used by Gerland, Gauda Berry rushed to Gauda Barbados' side in time to deal with the attacks from the surroundings. Three Suns and Moon August. What's the situation? Can you continue? The moment the strange song sounded, McGillis, who was connected to Bayeri through the Alea consciousness system, also lost his mind for a moment, but he quickly woke up. But before he could recover from his momentary absent-mindedness, Glaze's troops, who were advancing alongside Bayeri, encountered the same situation as Glaze's third squad, who were protecting Barbados. First squad, second squad, please respond. McGillis kept calling his subordinates, but he didn't get a reply. Fortunately, even though the Gundabei force had lost its cover, McGillis was still able to deal with the attacks coming from all directions with ease by relying on its outstanding mobility. However, while dealing with the enemy's attack, McGillis also noticed the strangeness around him. The subordinates that fell into silence and didn't respond to McGillis' call at all, whether it was the pilots piloting the Gretz or the soldiers piloting the mobile soldiers in the rear, they didn't seem to be attacked by the ancient doomed sacrifice. Taking advantage of the moment when the enemy's attack paused, Gauda Bayeri retreated with all his strength and jumped to a hillside behind him, temporarily escaping the predicament of being almost surrounded by the enemy. Are you ignoring them? The subordinates who had stopped attacking were not surrounded by the ancient disaster priests. They ignored them and circled around them. They did not treat the subordinates who were in a daze and did not know what was going on outside as targets. The only thing that attracted the attention of the ancient adversity sacrificers was the humans who were still resisting the attacks of the ancient adversity sacrificers. No, McGillis noticed that other than his own side, there were only a few other areas with activity. In the next moment, those places fell into a deathly silence, leaving only a seemingly lonely and powerless area that was still resisting, the battlefront where Gouda and Barbados were. Therefore, McGillis had only one choice. Not bad. It's just that no one seems to be reacting. With the support of the Gouda and Bailey, the two Gouda fighters quickly stabilized their positions and gradually retreated. As for the rest of Glaze's troops and soldiers, McGillis was powerless to save them. Looking at the ancient adversity sacrificers who did not point their guns at his subordinates who had lost all ability to resist, McGillis had only this choice. What was even stranger was that, as the Gundam Barry and Gundam Barbados retreated, the ancient doomed sacrifice that had been trying to surround them suddenly quieted down. It no longer paid any attention to the two Gundams that had retreated from the battlefield. Instead, it surrounded the humans who were still standing there in a daze. It was as if they wanted to move these humans who had lost the ability to sense the outside world. What's going on? Bring them back and kill them? Mitsuyuki also noticed this, but he did not think as much as McGillis. No, I don't know. However, I'm afraid that the reason why my subordinates have become like this has something to do with the song just now. McGillis recalled the moment when he lost his mind and could not help but feel a trace of fear. He did not know how much time had passed and did not know what was going on outside. He only knew the feeling of being muddle-headed in the endless chaos. Even if it was only for a moment, it was enough for McGillis to remember for the rest of his life. Song? I didn't hear any song just now. What surprised McGillis was that compared to him, who had been absent-minded for a moment and then immediately regained consciousness, the three suns and moons were not affected by the sudden singing from the beginning to the end. After being stunned, McGillis laughed loudly. Ha! Is that so? Is that so? So that's it. So that's it. I understand now. Mitsuyuki August. Looks like the supreme power in the legends is true. The power that the Alea consciousness system gives us is real. Its existence is to prevent us from being deceived by those illusory lies. McGillis was once confused, but in front of Mitsuyuki, who was also a user of the Alea consciousness system, he understood. He understood why he was able to wake up from his momentary loss of consciousness. The reason was that they who had activated the Alea consciousness system and were connected to Gouda were not considered complete humans. The song was terrifying, but the cold Alea consciousness system was the key to McGillis and Mitsuyuki's escape. The distance was getting further and further, until Gouda Barry and Gouda Barbados returned to the deathly silent rear. Not a single ancient doomed sacrificial appeared behind them. I wonder what's the situation on Sir Knight's side? It's rare for Sir Knight to attract most of the ancient doomed sacrificial's forces by himself. But we, standing in the dead silent camp, McGillis looked at the surrounding soldiers who were in a daze. Even the movement of the two Gundams when they returned couldn't wake up the soldiers who had lost their souls. McGillis couldn't help but frown. Given the current situation, the only forces he could use were Bailey and Barbados of the three suns and moons. But even if the strength of the two was strong enough, in the face of a torrential tide of enemies, McGillis did not have the confidence to perform as valiant as the tusked Lion Zero style. Mitsuyuki, can I trouble you to contact Sir Knight? Okay. McGillis and Mitsuyuki's path was blocked by the movement caused by the giant egg. And Raiminkai's side was also the same. But what blocked the tusked Lion Zero's path was not wave after wave of ancient doom sacrificial, but only one ancient doom sacrificial. Moreover, it was an old acquaintance. Kai, are you ready? State Zero's voice became extra cautious. I'm ready. But then again, even if I'm not ready, will the enemy give us time to prepare? Raiminkai responded, then complained. Yes. From a moment the giant egg appeared, the enemy would not give them any time to prepare, so that Raiminkai and the others could find a way to deal with the giant egg. However, What no one expected was that the person who stood out to block the way was actually the culprit who directly caused the appearance of the giant egg that isolated this world from this world. The pitch-black bow angel, and its pilot Lamia Labrise. Lion, I'll never let you pass. As the black wings spread out, the powerful ancient doom mech called Bow Angel pulled the bowstring and locked on to the tusk Lion Zero from afar. At this moment, there was no need to use any words to talk. Whether it was Raymond Kai's side or Lamia Labrise's side, they both knew that the other party would not be moved by their words. From the beginning, there was only opposition between the two sides, and they could only oppose each other. Raymond Kai, who was standing behind Star City, must be the enemy of the Parliament of Destiny. Target confirmed. Reading data. In front of Lamia was the steel lion that was quickly locked on. Her voice gradually became cold. Aiming complete. As the bowstring vibrated, the arrow called Phantom Arrow instantly left the bowstring, crossed the void, and stabbed at the tusk Lion Zero, suspended in the air. It's coming. State Zero. The Black Bow Angel's attack was fast. But with the previous battle experience, Ray Minkai was now much calmer. It's coming. State Zero growled. Instead of retreating, it flapped its light wings and rushed to the Phantom Arrow's attack path. The huge lion's head tilted slightly, and the huge mouth opened and closed, biting the Phantom Arrow that crossed the void. Under the terrible light emitted by the Phantom Arrow, the tusk Lion Zero's face looked particularly ferocious and terrifying. Break for me. As State Zero roared, the Phantom Arrow that was bitten by it broke, like a mirror shattering into pieces, and beautifully disappeared in the air. Roar. Woman, is that all you've got? The first time it encountered the Black Bow Angel, State Zero was once tricked by the Phantom Arrow of the Black Bow Angel. Now it would never suffer in front of the same trick. The tusk Lion Zero's performance made Lamia frown slightly. The Phantom Arrow was bitten to pieces? There is no relevant information in the database. Is it the ability of the new mech? As one of the final counselors, Lamia would not be frightened by this. Since the long-range attack did not work, Lamia naturally had other means to use. Then, let's use close combat to find out your details. The right hand opened and closed, and the long bow held by the Black Bow Angel turned into a stream of light and returned to the palm of the Black Bow Angel. Then, the Black Bow Angel stretched its right hand to its left arm, and a beam sword appeared in its hand. Take this. Phantom Sword. In front of the giant egg, the Black Bow Angel's figure flashed and crossed the distance of 1,000 meters. It appeared in front of the tusk Lion Zero and raised the beam sword in its hand to stab the steel lion's head. This attack went straight to the vital point. However, it was said before, State Zero would definitely not lose to the same trick again. The light wings on the tusk Lion Zero's back flapped, and several beams of sword light were waved, forcibly blocking the Black Bow Angel's stab. Then, below the tusk Lion Zero's head, the cannons roared. Several cannonballs were fired when it was unprepared and went straight to the Black Bow Angel's chest and abdomen. Just like what the Black Bow Angel did, the tusk Lion Zero's counterattack also went straight to the vital point. Boom! Boom! In an instant, the firestorm set off by the cannonballs swept between the two and unexpectedly separated the two mechs. It hit. No! No! Be careful. State Zero. That mech is not a mech that can be easily destroyed. Ray Minkai, who was familiar with the Bow Angel's attack pattern, was not careless because of this. So far, the Bow Angel that Ray Minkai saw with his own eyes only used the Phantom Arrow and Phantom Sword. And the more powerful seal of the Mirage and Flaming Phoenix Arrow had not been used. As expected, before State Zero responded to Ray Minkai's warning, the man and the cat felt a tremor at the same time. A hint of fear towards the arrival of death. State Zero. Fully activate the Lambda Drive system. Before Ray Minkai finished his words, the flames that engulfed the Black Bow Angel in front of them were torn apart by a cold light. It was a dazzling light, but there was no person or object behind this light. It was as if it had only appeared for a brief moment before disappearing. It was so beautiful and breathtaking. But behind this fleeting moment, there was endless killing intent. Seal of the Mirage. The Black Bow Angel. No, this was the original Bow Angel's powerful killer move. Once this move was used, many Bow Angels would appear around the target that the Bow Angel had locked onto and slash down. Perhaps there were many phantoms among these Bow Angels. However, no one had ever been able to survive this attack. This was one of the Bow Angel's killer moves. Dodge? It was too late. There was no way to dodge. Then, Ray Minkai and State Zero only had one choice. Take the initiative to face the danger. The Lambda Drive system was fully activated, and the Black Bow Angel seal of the Mirage's first slash landed on the Tusk Line Zero's back, the base of the wings. Obviously, Lamia, who activated the seal of the Mirage, did not give the Tusk Line Zero a chance to escape from the seal of the Mirage. Unfortunately, this slash was blocked by the Lambda Drive system's force field. Roar. Woman, don't underestimate me. Although it was blocked, the Tusk Line Zero was shocked. It roared angrily and swept its tail that was rarely used, but was still equipped with a sword, trying to sweep away the Black Bow Angel that was attacking from behind. The result could be imagined. The one that was swept by the tail was not the Black Bow Angel's body, but a phantom that covered the body's attack position. State Zero, cooperate with my control. At this moment, Ray Minkai no longer cared about his partner's feelings. He directly took over the Tusk Lion Zero's control. Clang! The sword was unsheathed. It was a sword light that was swung towards the front right of the Tusk Lion Zero. Buzz! Wherever the sword light passed, there was a burst of light from the beam sword. It was the Black Bow Angel, and it was its body. Ray Minkai actually predicted the attack route of the Black Bow Angel in advance. Clang! Immediately after, the Tusk Lion Zero's left front claw slammed out and a sword blade was formed. Buzz! The sword blade was swung, and there was another light from the beam sword. Behind, left, above. In front of Ray Minkai was the brilliance of the beam sword, and it was the Tusk Lion Zero's sword light that burst out when it was swung to resist the seal of the Mirage. One sword, another sword. Between the intertwining of the swords, Ray Minkai's spirit became more and more concentrated, and he could more clearly sense the changes in the surrounding space. The reason for every change in space must be the sign of the seal of the Mirage's next attack. Several swords, 10 swords, more than 10 swords. In the confrontation of the swords, the phantoms scattered, and a pattern fell from the void, enveloping the Tusk Lion Zero. The last blow. State Zero, support me with all your strength. Without hesitation, Ray Minkai's attention was all focused on the sky. In the blink of an eye, the phantom sword light fell like thunder and bombarded the long-toothed lion's sword blade at zero distance. Chapter 749. Under the thunder sword light, the huge pattern that was no different from the array shattered. However, in addition to the shattered array, the target that should have shattered along with it remained in place and was in a stalemate with the thunder sword light that fell from the sky. Above the fragments of the array that fell like snowflakes was the Dark Bow Angel that wielded the thunder sword light and launched a killing blow. Under the thunder sword light was the steel lion that raised 2 blades of different sizes to block it. It blocked it. In the cockpit of the Dark Bow Angel, Lamia looked at the steel lion that was in a stalemate with the Dark Bow Angel in shock. Someone could completely block the attack of the seal of the Mirage? How is this possible? In Lamia's memory bank, there were only 2 people who could do this. One of them was the venerable Dong Fong who had fought with her before. The other was the man who stood above Xing Yao City and was called the Pioneer by the world. Now, in this world, there is a third person who could block the seal of the Mirage. Boom! The Dark Bow Angel's wings expanded sharply, and the light sword in its hand burst out a chaotic flame. After forcibly shaking off the Saber Lion Zero, it retreated and no longer entangled with the Saber Lion. Such a decisive retreat surprised Ray Minkai. Kai, chase! State Zero was eager to chase and attack, but he did not expect that before it could move, the two swords that had clashed head-on with the black bow angel's seal of the mirage suddenly shattered. They slid down the steel lion's back with many shards, rolling and falling into the valley below. Now, I'm afraid we don't have much strength left to chase. Ray Minkai might have some regrets, but he did not dwell on it much. What? In State Zero's surprised voice, a sense of weightlessness suddenly hit. The light wings that originally supported the saber lion and allowed it to soar above the blue sky actually followed in the footsteps of the shattered blades. As the fragments collapsed, the tusked Lion Zero fell into the valley below. It's falling. Kai, think of a way. Calm down. I'll control it. Ray Minkai's movements were swift. The moment the light wings completely collapsed, Ray Minkai used the recoil generated by the firing of the grenade cannon below the Type Zero's neck to quickly adjust the balance of the falling Type Zero. Then, at the moment when the body once again maintained its balance, a glimmer of light quietly rose, like a small platform that firmly held the long-toothed lion in the air about 100 meters above the ground. Phew, that was close. Ray Minkai's success in stabilizing the body made State Zero heave a sigh of relief. The battle is not over yet. State Zero. Compared to the relieved State Zero, Ray Minkai's gaze never left the black bow angel. Ray Minkai was still paying attention to the movements of the bow angel even when he was in an emergency situation where the tusked lion would have smashed a big hole in the valley if he had hesitated for a moment. The Longfong Lion's Zero style fell in the blink of an eye. If the Black Bow Angel wanted to pursue the Longfong Lion Zero, the opportunity could still be seized. But as the Longfong Lion's Zero stabilized its body balance, the broken blade and the roots of the light wings once again glowed faintly and began to repair itself. The Black Bow Angel was still unmoved, just suspended in front of the giant egg, watching the Longfong Lion's every move. It looked like if you don't come, I won't go over. This made Ray Minkai somewhat puzzled. Just now, when there was a disagreement, they started a fight, and when they raised their hands, they used a big killing move. Was it a dream? The answer was obviously no. Miss L. She seems to have some situation. How's the situation on your side? A message from inside the giant egg made Lamia stop her actions, and for a long time, she did not launch the pursuit of the Longfong Lion Zero. What happened? Mr. K, is she awake? Now, inside the giant egg, the girl whom Lamia called her was still far from awakening. The song that reverberated in the firmament was nothing more than his unconscious, instinctive behavior in his deep sleep. No, I don't know if she's awake or not. It's just that she just opened her eyes and looked up at the sky. Lucio's voice seemed to be a little anxious, and at the same time, a picture of a gray-haired girl looking up at the starry sky in the center of the screen was transmitted to the screen of the Black Bow Angel. The appearance of the picture suddenly made Lamia change her mind. I'll return immediately. In the giant egg, on the mirror-like surface of the sea, Lucio turned off the communicator and slightly breathed a sigh of relief. Just now, it was really a close call. If you failed like this, then I would have a headache. It turned out that Lucio's emergency contact was to cover for Ray Minkai. Could it be that her movement was caused by Lucio? No, Lucio had no way to affect her existence, and he couldn't even set foot on the mirror-like surface of the sea. The appearance of the picture, just now, could only be described as a coincidence. Lucio, who stood by the sea and watched her for a while, did not expect that the gray-haired girl, who was sitting in the middle of the sea like a delicate doll and quietly singing the ballad that Lamia called Return to the Land of Origin, would actually raise her head and look up at the strange starry sky. If Lucio had not suddenly had an idea and took a picture of it, he might not have been able to call Lamia back so easily. Outside the giant egg, the sudden disappearance of the Black Bow Angel made Ray Minkai and State Zero stunned. Gone. Ray Minkai thought for a while and could only give such a speculation. I'm afraid that something happened in the egg in front of us. State Zero's holographic projection shook, and also tacitly agreed with Rei Minkai's speculation. Looking at the current situation, to be able to make the Black Bow Angel, who had such amazing combat power, abandon the enemy and return quickly, there could only be something terrible happening inside the giant egg. State Zero paused and asked slowly, "Then how do we go in?" This question stumped Rei Minkai. Let's go and take a look first. While there are no annoying flies around here, due to the impact of the battle between the tusked lion and the Black Bow Angel, with their battlefield as the center, there were no traces of the ancient doomed sacrificers within a range of about 3 kilometers. This also gave Rei Minkai a chance to observe the layer of eggshell at a close distance. He meant what he said. Before Rei Minkai finished speaking, the anxious State Zero controlled the mech to jump down from the hillside and quickly approach the layer of eggshell. Half an hour passed. The tusked lion, which had circled around the layer of eggshell a few times, suddenly waved its front claws and slapped down on the layer of eggshell. Zap! A burst of lightning actually jumped back and forth between the lion's claws and the eggshell as the tusked lion waved its front claws down and made a series of ear-piercing screeches. I can't find a place to enter. The tusked lion lowered its head and looked at the lightning between its front claws. It waved its front claws while complaining unhappily. I'm afraid it's a dimensional fault. The closer he got to the layer of eggshell, the clearer the memory in Rei Minkai's mind became. The layer of eggshell in front of him gradually overlapped with the giant egg that appeared in Rei Minkai's classic work. It won't hatch that thing, right? As soon as he thought of the thing that was connected to the giant egg in his memory, Rei Minkai suddenly felt great pressure. If the Black Bow Angel was a powerful enemy, then the thing that was closely related to the giant egg must be an existence that the tusked lion, State Zero, could not contend against. That is the supreme existence that can adjust the world and reshape time. State Zero, don't hold back. Or else, we're all finished, right? Rei Minkai's tumultuous thoughts had already been detected by the tusked lion, State Zero. However, before Rei Minkai spoke, State Zero could not take the initiative to speak. Yes, we're all finished. If that's what's inside the giant egg. Ayo! The tusked lion's throat rolled with a low growl, as if it was responding to Rei Minkai's words. Immediately, the tusked lion, who was standing in front of the giant egg, slowly retreated for a distance. The gaze that was staring at the giant egg gradually became fierce, and the sword hilt that was still in the state of self-repair suddenly accelerated. The glimmers that were slowly and orderly repairing the sword blade and the light wings seemed to have gone crazy and swarmed to the back of the tusked lion. In the blink of an eye, a cluster of light condensed by countless glimmers appeared impressively. Roar! This was the roar of the tusked lion when the cluster of light grew rapidly and brought a heavy burden to the tusked lion. Kai, you have to think clearly. Before this attack is launched, I can't move. As long as a little cockroach appears at this time, not only will all the previous efforts be wasted, but it may also implicate you and me. In order to break through this layer of suspected dimensional fault force field, the tusked lion used all the energy that it had accumulated until now to launch an attack. A terrifying attack that was enough to split the force field in front of it. However, during this period, the tusked lion could not move, and, at the same time, it was in an extremely dangerous situation. Do it. State Zero. We have no other choice. The memory of the giant egg gradually recovered, and Rei Minkai did not dare to take the risk, regardless of whether the thing in this giant egg was that thing or not. Waiting for the result would inevitably lead to the worst outcome. Therefore, there was only one choice from the beginning to the end. Hey, you really dare to gamble. Kai. State Zero chuckled, but did not say anything. In the end, State Zero's thoughts were the same as Rei Minkai's. No matter what the result was, waiting for the result to appear would only lead to the worst outcome. Only by taking the initiative to attack could they grasp the initiative. Roar! The roar of the king of beasts instantly resounded through the mountains, and alarmed the ancient doomed sacrificers that had retreated a few kilometers away. However, these ancient doomed sacrificers seemed to be afraid of the existence of the Blackbow Angel and did not dare to move towards the giant egg. Could it be that those little things have not realized that the body has already escaped? State Zero laughed heartily as he activated all of his abilities. I don't know, but we have to focus now. Lei Mingkai really wanted to respond to this question, but in his heart, he vaguely felt that as long as he said even the slightest bit of agreement, he would be like the many seniors who had raised a flag, suffering a backlash the moment before they welcomed victory. The turbulent energy was constantly being stimulated from the body of the long-fanged Lion Zero, and the energy storm that was condensed wantonly declared its existence, forming a terrifying storm around the long-fanged Lion Zero. Every time the storm swept through, it would inevitably tear the surrounding ground apart. The surrounding mountain rocks were shattered. In an instant, the lush green forest was turned into ashes. Roar! The roar of the beast became more and more painful, but also more and more carefree. The ball of light condensed on the tusked lion's back grew rapidly, and in a few breaths, it grew from an oval to a rectangle, and from a rectangle, it condensed into a sword embryo. Sword! It's a sword! It's a sword! In the roar of the king of beasts, the huge sword embryo suddenly shattered, revealing the tusked lion's unparalleled sword blade that was condensed with all of its strength. Void Slash. In the afterglow of the disintegrated sword embryo, Lei Mingkai's heart involuntarily surfaced a name that had never appeared in any of Soth's mechanical beasts before. Hey, did I scare you? Kai, this is my new masterpiece. It's the combination of everything we've experienced, everything that we have condensed into a sword equipment. It was a gigantic sword that seemed ordinary, but when one looked at it, one would be able to see through its transparent surface, and countless images from another world would appear on it. Every time Lei Mingkai's gaze touched the sword blade, there was always an illusion that he couldn't extricate himself and subconsciously wanted to indulge in it. Is this the equipment you made yourself, State Zero? Oof. Of course. Otherwise, do you think that relying on the power of our hometown world can break this damn eggshell? State Zero roared proudly. Then, come on. Let me see your full blow. Roar. As the sword blade moved, the void shattered, scattering specks of light from another world, covering the steel lion that was advancing towards the giant egg with a mysterious veil. At this moment, inside the giant egg, Lamia, who had just returned to the giant egg and stood by the sea to observe the situation of the gray-haired girl, did not have time to ask Lu Lucio about the situation. A great sense of crisis suddenly enveloped her. Not good. Someone is breaking the enchantment. Lamia exclaimed and disappeared, leaving Lu Lucio standing alone by the sea, accompanied by the gray-haired girl. What a series of surprises. Lu Lucio looked at the remnant leaves that rolled past the place where Lamia disappeared, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. The stream of light flew past, and the Blackbow Angel that flew out of the giant egg once again did not have time to observe the situation around it. An earth-shattering sword light that seemed to be able to destroy heaven and earth slashed at it head-on. The Blackbow Angel that had just flown out of the giant egg had no way to avoid this attack. The only thing it could do was to meet the attack. Meet the attack with full force. The black wings expanded, and the biochemical wings scattered. The Blackbow Angel's hands were full of light, and the bow and arrow were in its hands. Limit lifted. Code enter. In the face of life and death, Lamia did not care where the attack came from, and directly instilled all the power that she could erupt into the light arrow. Go! Crush the enemy! Flaming Phoenix Arrow! In an instant, flames burned the sky, and the phoenix's cry shocked the heavens. The flaming phoenix that rolled up the monstrous flames that burned the sky condensed from the phantom arrow shot by the Bow Angel, and rushed towards the sword light that broke through the void and slashed at the Black Bow Angel. At this moment, the world changed color, and everything was silent. Chapter 750. Between heaven and earth, there was only the terrifying brilliance that erupted when the strong confronted each other. Even if it was the enormous egg, it was still unable to suppress the dazzling radiance of this terrifying radiance. The terrifying energy that soared into the sky shook the firmament. The clouds that covered the sky were all dispersed, and a mysterious void hidden behind the 9 heavens was completely revealed on this land. Rumble between heaven and earth, there was only the roar of thunder as it galloped through the firmament. As long as one was still on this battlefield, as long as one's mind was still clear, it was inevitable that they would be shocked by the strange phenomenon that occurred above the firmament at this moment. What the hell is going on? Kalta Yet-Hugh and her subordinates, who were previously covering Ray Minkai and the long-toothed lion's attack, did not seem to be affected by the song, but they were surrounded by ancient doomed sacrifices from all directions. Moreover, among these ancient doomed sacrifices, there were some greys that were larger than the greys that Kalta Yet-Hugh was familiar with. From time to time, they caused casualties to the MS troops led by Kalta Yet-Hugh. Commander, when the battle was at its fiercest, one of his subordinates approached the Grez Knight commander that Kalta was piloting and proposed an idea. But Kalta rejected the idea. No, right now, we still don't know the situation of the other troops. If we retreat like this, it's not what I want. Now, not only between heaven and earth, but even the mountains were resounding with the rumbling sound of thunder. What's more, around this battlefield, the mountains began to crack, and there were signs that the mountains were about to collapse. What kind of attack could cause such a terrible scene? Kalta did not know the answer to this, but she did not want to know. The only thing she wanted to do now was to defeat the enemy in front of her as much as possible. For this reason, those strange greys that were interspersed in the ancient doom sacrifices became Kalta's target. Unfortunately, before Kalta could give the order, these strange greys that were interspersed in the ancient doom sacrifices suddenly suffered casualties. Reinforcements? No. From the radar, there were only 2 friendly signals that arrived on this battlefield. Buzz! In the ancient doom sacrifices, 2 rays of light flashed, and a strange graze was cut in half on the spot and fell to the ground. Boom! On the other side, the strange glazer that was forcing one of Kalta's subordinates into a dead end was suddenly pierced from the back by a mace that pierced through the cockpit and fell into the abyss of death. Kalta, issue. I didn't expect you to have the guts to enter this battlefield. As the 2 figures leaped out from the waves of ancient doomed sacrifice and landed in front of Kalta's Grey Knight commander, Kalta understood who they were. McGillis Farid? Did you really activate the Byron Force? Kalta looked at Bail Gouda in surprise and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The man she had once admired was actually such a shallow person? Yes, Bailai has been asleep for a long time, and now that the ancient doom ritual has been revived, it is time for him to awaken. McGillis didn't seem to understand the meaning of Kalta's words and laughed loudly. Then, why is Gouda Barbados working with you? Kalta knew very well what Gundam Barbados represented, so she was very surprised by the appearance of the 3 moons and Barbados. It was His Excellency who asked me to assist this, chocolate. The trio didn't seem to remember McGillis' name and gave him a nickname based on their past impressions. To be honest, Ray Minkai was the one who gave her the most chocolate, but because Olga forbade the trio from giving Ray Minkai a nickname, the trio went with the flow and gave McGillis the nickname. Perhaps this was also a kind of karma? Chocolate. On the other hand, Kalta was very surprised by this nickname, but after being stunned for a while, she reacted. McGillis, where are your subordinates? They are asleep. McGillis was very straightforward. After giving the answer casually, he threw the question back to Kalta. How can your subordinates still be awake? Didn't you hear the singing just now? While they were talking, a strange glaze took advantage of the fact that several blue men were attacking together and tried to ambush the Gundam Bailai. Unexpectedly, The Bailey, controlled by McGillis, cut down the glaze along with the blue man with its sword. Boom! The flames of the explosion illuminated Kalta's face. Her gaze became even more puzzled. Singing? What's singing? We didn't hear any strange sounds just now. McGillis frowned at Kalta's answer, but he didn't think too much about it. Is that so? Then, let's move together. Let's hurry and meet up with that knight. Okay. McGillis, the trio, and Kalta successfully met up with the others. On the other hand, Lei Minkai had already reached the final stage. The blade that cut through the void fell and shattered the flaming phoenix arrow that was shot out in a hurry, then went straight for the black bow angel behind the arrow. The moment the shrill cry of the phoenix sounded, the black bow angel had only two choices. 1. Emergency retreat and use all its strength to escape from the killing sword. Secondly, he had to use all his strength to fight against the Long Fong Lion's killing sword strike. No matter which of the two choices was chosen, in the end, the layer of eggshell that was protected by the black bow angel would inevitably be cut off by the killing sword. The only difference was whether the black bow angel could survive. The choice was made by Lamia almost at the moment the blade fell. The black wings trembled, and the black bow angel's body was covered with a black light. The moment the blade fell and was about to cut the black bow angel's head, it disappeared without a trace. Boom! Without the protection of the black bow angel, the giant egg no longer had any means to block the long-toothed lion's killing sword that condensed all the power it had so far. The sword light that erupted from the blade. It was a huge egg that covered the entire world. The moment the two came into contact, it was another vision of the sky changing color. It was like the sound of a giant bell being rung. It was the sound of something being broken. It was a terrifying echo that was born from something terrifying. The sky that had not closed previously and blocked the mysterious void again after the ninth heaven was once again shaken by the impact from below. At the same time, when the eggshell was broken, the mountains rolled up a howling wind, sweeping all the creatures that could not stabilize their bodies and could not find shelter in time into the sky. They were constantly struggling in the wind, rolling towards the place where the giant egg was broken. That the sky is broken. What kind of power is this to be able to reach such a level? The moment before the wind swept between the mountains, Kalta, who was leading the remaining subordinates in time, along with McGillis and the three suns and moons, was shocked to witness the moment when the giant egg was broken. It's that lion. McGillis' eyes flickered, but he hid the surging thoughts in his heart, not letting Kalta see the abnormality. What a powerful power. Is that also the power of Sir Zero? The three suns and moons were also surprised. It was just that he could not find many words to use to describe the scene he saw at the moment. Let's go. Let's speed up. Kalta turned his head and glanced behind him, where they had already lost track of the enemy. For some reason, at the moment when the giant egg was broken and the wind swept, the ancient doomed sacrifice and the strange Gretz that were surrounding Kalta and the others retreated without looking back. They did not care whether Kalta and the others would take the opportunity to launch a pursuit. This change made Kalta even more determined to rush to the side of the long-toothed lion. Let's go. At this moment, no one would have any objections. To figure out the strange phenomenon between heaven and earth, I'm afraid that the only way to get the corresponding answer is to rush to the side of the long-toothed lion. The giant egg that covered the sky had been broken, and the small world that was isolated from this world was once again exposed in front of Rei Minkai's eyes. However, through the constantly disintegrating eggshell, Rei Minkai saw a shocking scene. A scene that could not help but make people fearful. People. Humans. Under the disintegrating eggshell, there were humans in gray robes with different faces. However, these humans, who should have had their own life trajectory and their own life preparations, were strangely standing under the small world of different sizes and mysterious buildings that seemed out of place in today's world. From the constantly zooming image, it could be seen that in addition to the dull faces of these humans in gray robes, there were strange patterns between their eyebrows and on their cheeks. At first glance, this seemed to have traveled through a space-time tunnel and returned to the mysterious ritual that appeared at the beginning of civilization. A Toya. Is that a Toya? Suddenly, a strange and urgent voice came from the public communication channel. The long-toothed lion looked back and found that Gout de Berry, Gout de Babados, and Mini Gret's Knight had arrived at this moment. The call just now should have been made by one of the pilots among the Mini Gret's Knights. Your Excellency Knight, that blow just now, the giant egg that was still disintegrating, the surrounding shattered mountains and earth. McGillis, who had just arrived, took a deep breath. Such terrifying destructive power, it was probably a terrifying realm that the MS and MA players of this world could not reach. Yes, it's me. I had a big fight with that winged mech. State Zero admitted this point without hesitation. If not for the degree of destruction at the scene that had already subverted McGillis and the others' understanding, State Zero's admission might have attracted their surprise. John, did you see a Toya just now? The attentive Kalta noticed another detail. Yes. Sir Kalta, over there, a Toya is over there. Even if he's changed his clothes and has strange patterns on his face, that's definitely a Toya. The pilot, who was called John by Kalta, quickly shared what he saw with everyone's mechs through the data link. At this moment, the atmosphere was solemn. The mystery that had been discovered in the Battle of Carpentaria seemed to have been solved. The missing humans were not killed. Instead, they were gathered in the giant egg. They were dressed in strange clothes and stood in a daze under the strange buildings. Your Excellency, it seems that the mystery we discovered before has finally been solved. However, I'm afraid our operation will not be so smooth. McGillis took a deep breath. What he saw in front of him was the answer to the clouds and the sun, but also the next worry. Inside the disintegrating giant egg, there must be a large number of enemies waiting for them to attack. The battle was bound to be more intense, or even tragic. In this case, the humans who seemed to have lost all ability to move would probably become the victims of the aftermath of the battle. Let's go. Ray Minkai pondered for a moment and said the decision that he had made long ago. State Zero took a step forward again, and the giant sword that split the giant egg and forced the Darkbow Angel to retreat immediately disintegrated, turning into a burst of bright light that dissipated in the air. At this moment, perhaps the State Zero's power was at its weakest. But Ray Minkai still chose to move forward. Seeing this, the three suns and moons followed without hesitation. On the other hand, Kalta and McGillis exchanged glances with each other across the screen, then followed behind the long-toothed lion and headed toward the collapsed giant egg. Inside the giant egg, the disintegrating shell and the gap in the sky that could not hide the mysterious void each occupied half of the sky, which was particularly strange and particularly frightening. It was a scene that could only be seen when the world was destroyed. But now, it was miraculously displayed in front of Lu Lucio. Lu Lucio slowly withdrew his gaze from the strange scene above his head and looked at the figure in the middle of the mirror sea again. From a moment the giant egg disintegrated, the singing stopped. It seemed to be frightened. It also seemed to be waiting. The former may be understandable, but the latter, Lu Lucio initially thought it was his own illusion, but after careful observation, Lu Lucio found that the latter seemed to be more likely. Because the giant mech that fell behind Lu Lucio brought the answer that Lu Lucio confirmed the latter. Boom! Amidst the roar of the thrusters, the Darkbow Angel landed directly on the flat ground dozens of meters behind Lu Lucio. Although the landing was very smooth, it could be seen from the many injuries on its body and even the scars on its arms that were almost completely damaged. It could be seen how terrible the battle that happened outside the giant egg was. The automatic defense mechanism didn't start. Compared to the damage to the Darkbow Angel, Lamia, who jumped down from the cockpit, was more concerned about the giant egg that allowed State Zero to destroy it. It seems to be waiting for something. Chapter 751. Above the Ninth Heaven. Above the crack that had not closed for a long time, Aryan Head's fleet, which had finished assembling, stared at the giant mouth that had caused such a commotion that even the humans in the void were shocked. "Commander, I saw it. We have seen the situation below, through the gap. Now, put it on the screen." As the scenes appeared on the main screen, the entire bridge was filled with exclamations of disbelief. Is this the scene that only happened during the sacrificial war? The giant egg that was slowly collapsing. Those mysterious buildings inside the giant egg were full of exotic charm. Those humans wearing robes with various mysterious patterns on their faces. This was completely different from the legends of the sacrificial war that had been passed down from human society to this day. This was simply a scene that only appeared in legends and myths. After the shock, everyone on the bridge subconsciously exchanged glances and quietly looked at the man who was watching the screen silently. Ristal Arion. Shortly after waking up from a coma, he unexpectedly returned to his Aryan Head fleet with his injured body, ordered all the warships that could be assembled, and set off for Earth. Not long ago, the Aryan Head fleet that had completed the assembly finally arrived on Earth at the moment when the Outer Orbit Command fleet, led by Kalta Yethu, launched the orbital airborne battle. It also happened to be the moment when the earth-shattering battle between the tusked lion and the dark-bow angel broke through the sky. Looking at the architectural style on the screen that was completely different from any civilization on Earth. Looking at those unfamiliar faces, but mixed with a few familiar faces, he felt a sense of dread. In his mind, he recalled the information that McGillis had sent through the top-secret communication channel that only those who had attended the Seven-Star Force meeting would know. Rydal Arian fell into a long silence. At this moment, the entire Aryan Head fleet was waiting for orders. Waiting for orders from the highest commander of the fleet. Among these people, there were also anxious people. Among them, Gelida Juris, who was nicknamed the Butterfly Woman, was the most anxious. "Master Arian, please order me to attack immediately. Since the young lady of the Yethu family has gone down, then we should also act immediately." Gelida Juris. This girl who was chosen by Rydal Arian and personally promoted to be his confidant had a very high drive. Anything that could bring glory and benefits to Ristal Lillian, she would move forward without hesitation toward her ultimate goal. Now it was the same. Although Kalta Yethu's reputation in the Seven-Star family and even Larshorn was not very good, it was undeniable that Kalta Yethu himself was a younger fleet commander than Rydal Arian. In addition, his own quality was not bad. One day, he would surpass Rydal Arian and become the ruler of Larshorn. For this reason, even if Gelida Juris did not put Kalta Yethu, she would inevitably be extremely sensitive to Kalta Yethu's actions, as well as hostility. "Calm down, Juris." Finally, in front of the restless confidant girl, Rydal Arian, who had been silent, finally reacted. "Our Aryan Head fleet left the ancient sacrifice on the moon and came to the synchronous orbit of the Earth, not to compete with other fleets, but to punish the traitor of Larshorn, the treacherous son of the Curzon family, Iagu Curzon." After a pause, Ristal Arian's gaze stopped at the aerial view. There, it happened to be the scene before the long-toothed lion led the Grey Knight troops, Gauda Bayeri, and Gauda Babados entered the giant egg. At this point, the Aryan Head fleet also figured out the reason for the earth-shattering battle that tore a hole in the sky. That strange-looking steel lion was probably one of the parties involved in that terrifying battle, wasn't it? And the other party was also likely to be the one behind the scenes who triggered the giant egg. An unknown existence with such terrifying combat power. Regardless of whether it was a friend or a foe, Rydal Arian felt that he must adopt a cautious strategy at present. Instead of rashly giving the order to invest the precious combat power of Aryan Head's fleet into the unknown giant egg, he did not rashly give the order. However, Rydal Arian's caution was not recognized by Gelida Juris. The young girl who wanted nothing more than to bring glory to Ristal Arian was still restless. Fortunately, the moment Rydal Arian finished his statement, an urgent message suddenly came from the radar personnel who were monitoring the inside of the giant egg. "Commander, the first primary target of the fleet has been discovered." The identification signal from the Reginald driven by Iagu Curzon has been discovered. Frequency locked. Coordinates confirmed. It's inside the giant egg. This news was undoubtedly a challenge to the cautious attitude that Restal Elian had insisted on. At this moment, whether it was Gelida Juris or the other people on the bridge, they were all waiting for Rydal Arian's order. Sure enough, the kid from the Curzon family never makes people feel at ease. Then, Gelida, take your troops and attack. Yes, Sir Rydal. Please look forward to the glory I will offer you. After the restless girl received permission from Rydal Arian, she calmed down. Immediately afterward, following behind the orbital airborne landing of the Reginald piloted by Julieta Julis, Glaze's troops in gray and black paint also flew out of their respective motherships. Judging from their appearance, they didn't seem to be anything special. But if one were to focus their attention on the huge, cylindrical equipment in their hands that was painted orange-yellow at the front and red at the back, this seemingly ordinary army of Grez appeared a little strange. The Insniff troops. This was the trump card that Rydal Arian dared to accept the crusade against the traitor Iagu Curzon. It was also the reason why he dared to leave the ancient sacrifice on the moon and deal with the traitor in the shortest time possible before returning to the moon to clean up. As the flames that represented the beginning of the orbital airborne battle of Aryan heads fleet gradually moved away, they quickly disappeared into the Earth's atmosphere. As they descended toward the giant egg, the released Insniff troops also accelerated and flew to the gap in the sky that finally began to close again, waiting for the order to attack. Iagu Curzon, don't force me to make that decision. At the same time, inside the giant egg, what blocked Ray Minkai and the others who broke into the giant egg was not some strange, mysterious object, but Iagu Curzon. No one knew the state of Iagu Curzon at this moment. The only thing they knew was that Iagu Curzon's voice came from the Reginald, which was 2 times larger than the ordinary Greys. Back off, ignorant mortals! Now, it is the eve of Gallowhorn's implementation of justice and righteousness. I will never allow anyone to obstruct the awakening of the goddess before justice arrives. The Reginald, which was no different from a human who could move freely and flexibly, made McGillis frown slightly. This feeling was not unfamiliar to him. Not long ago, he had made the same choice. Alea consciousness system? Iagu Curzon. I didn't expect you to equip yourself with an unknown equipment that you regarded as only a rat would use. Shut up, McGillis Farid. If it weren't for the incompetence of the Farid family, I wouldn't have ended up like this. As soon as the furious voice sounded, Iagu Curzon's tone suddenly changed from a furious tone to an extremely pious one. No, it was I who deeply felt my own powerlessness from Lord Rydal's injury. So I received the favor of the goddess and was able to glimpse the path of justice that we have always upheld. So, I will never let you obstruct the goddess. Such an extreme change made everyone look at each other in dismay. Has Curzon gone mad? Kalta Issue was a little hesitant and also a little incredulous. Although he had also experienced such a period of time as a member of the new generation, he was not as crazy as Iagu Curzon in front of him. I don't know, McGillis responded straightforwardly. But this is a matter between us 7 stars families. Your Excellency, please go first. Leave this to us. Then McGillis voiced his thoughts. Kalta Issue also agreed to this. Yes, this is a matter between us 7 stars families. Knight, you go first. McGillis and Kalta's idea was good, but the seemingly crazy Iagu Curzon did not seem to be letting Ray Minkai leave easily. Want to leave? That won't do. All of you stay. Come out. Loyal guards of the goddess. Boom, boom. The moment Iagu's crazy voice suddenly became high-pitched, the surrounding mysterious and exotic ancient buildings suddenly exploded, and several strange Grez rushed out. They quickly rushed out of the smoke and dust of the collapsed buildings, waving their swords at an extremely fast speed, and after cutting down several Grez Knight who could not react in time, they turned to pounce on other targets. Buzz, buzz. Unfortunately, The following attack did not work at all, because the moment the Grez Knight fell, Gout de Bailai and Gout de Babado's counterattack followed closely. Under the swords and hammers of Gout de Bailai and Gout de Babados, the several strange Grez were all turned into piles of wreckage flowing with black liquid. Reorganize the formation. Be alert of the surroundings. Kalta hurriedly called for the remaining subordinates to reorganize the formation. The assault just now had left few of the subordinates she led. If it were not for the timely help of Gout de Bailai and Gout de Babados, most of these subordinates would have been killed by this sudden attack. This was a disgrace, an unquestionable disgrace. However, Kalta would not become angry because of this, because she already knew that keeping calm in battle was the key to victory. Now, do you still want to go first? The steel lion blocked in front of Reginald, and at the same time, it was the key to dispel Reginald's idea of taking advantage of the strange Grez sneak attack. Iagu Kazan also saw the battle that broke through the sky just now. Moreover, he also got more information about the Longfong lion from his Nereophart. That heaven-defying combat power, that elusive ability, it made Iagu Kazan fearful. Even if he now boasted that he had been blessed by the goddess, he did not dare to attack the Longfong lion head-on. This also gave the long-fanged lion a chance to attack, an opportunity to suppress Reginald Reynolds just by standing there. However, this was not a long-term solution. Rustle, rustle, rustle. It was the sound made by the MA army when they moved. Ray Minkai and others were once again surrounded by the MA army. This was also a matter of course. If the giant egg was regarded as the enemy's nest, this was bound to happen. Then, in the face of such a situation, the scene that McGillis and Kalta had shown before seemed to become a face-slapping scene. This is really a headache. It seems that our decision has been forced to take back. Kalta. McGillis sighed and looked at the Grez Knight commander driven by Kalta. Sorry, Knight, it seems that we can only let you continue to support us for a while. This may not be the case. McGillis and Kalta successively admitted that everything in front of them was already beyond their control, and the Longfong lion looked up slightly at the sky above his head. Above the slowly closing sky, the meteor shower appeared once again. Moreover, it was also carrying a raging flame toward the giant egg, falling rapidly here. Get out of the way, as Lei Minkai reminded everyone loudly. Everyone piloted their mechs to hide behind the surrounding bunkers. The people who joined Lars Horn are really shameful. After hiding in a building with a large internal space, the voice of 3 suns and moons also sounded in the communication, making Kalta speechless. Yes, judging from the identification signal detected by the radar, the sudden appearance of the meteor shower was not an asteroid from space, but a tactic similar to the orbital airdrop led by Kalta Yetyu. That's the MS of the Aryan Head Fleet. It's the MS unit led by Gelida Juris. Gelida Juris? I didn't expect it to be this butterfly woman. Then McGillis, Kalta, 3 suns and moons, keep up. When a familiar name sounded, Ray Minkai had already made a decision. The flames set off by the meteor fell into the interior of the giant egg, shattering the eggshell that had not completely disintegrated and had already become extremely fragile. The raging flames even scattered among the buildings where Iagu Cousin was located. Boom! The flames soared and swept around, and the voice of Gelida Juris sounded. Aryan Head Fleet belongs to Gelida Juris is ordered to crusade against the rebel Iagu Kazan. Chapter 752. Crusade against the traitor Iagu Kazan. Iagu Kazan was furious at the declaration made by Gelida Juris, who descended from the sky. He never thought that he, who was dedicated to justice, would become a traitor to Lars Horn. How is this possible? Yes, traitor, Iagu Kazan. Gelida Juris' voice came from the Reginald that descended from the sky. It was a cold voice that regarded the person in front of her as an enemy. This was the voice that Iagu Kazan had heard when he first saw Gelida Juris beside Ristal Aryan. Therefore, Anyone who was an enemy of Restal would definitely fall into the underworld with the cold voice of Jarita Juris. Iagu Kazan knew this very well. But now, this voice was directed at him, who was dedicated to the justice of Lars Horn. Jarita Juris, are you crazy? I'm fighting for the justice of Lars Horn. As soon as Iagu finished speaking, he was refuted by Jarita. No, I don't know who you're fighting for. But now, you're just a traitor who raised the blade of rebellion against Lars Horn. Jarita didn't know what happened to Iagu, but as long as it was something that Restal Aryan believed, she would definitely regard it as the truth. Therefore, she took action. From space, she parachuted from orbit to Earth and fell into this giant egg in order to eliminate the traitor Iagu Kazan. The flames swept through the entire building complex and also separated the two Reginales in their respective areas. But both sides knew that this wall of fire could not stop Reginald's attack at all. Dong! Dong! The battle was about to start. The short conversation did not allow the young people who were once under Restal Aryan to reach a reconciliation, and it even established Jarita's determination to crusade against Iagu. That determination was as determined as a grenade that was fired out of the barrel, tearing through the wall of fire and heading straight for the huge Reginald. She would never turn back until she killed Iagu. Boom! However, the grenade that tore through the wall of fire and flew towards Reginald was cut in half by his sword. The grenade exploded in the air and did not cause any damage to Reginald the Great at all. Jarita Juris, why don't you understand? This was the justice bestowed by God, justice that even Rydal Elian cannot refuse. In the light of the grenade explosion, the huge head of Reginald twitched, as if it was struggling with something. Justice? God. Julieta was stunned for a moment before she sneered. God? Iago cousin. At first, I thought that you were just a little stupid, but now it seems that you are really just an idiot. The grenade didn't work. However, Julia had other means of attack. The Reginald he was piloting was specially modified for the purpose of conducting experiments. During the modification process, not only did they test the ideas of many designers, but they also modified it according to Julia's operating habits. Among them, the 130mm rifle was the representative of many weapons. The whistling bullets followed closely behind, not giving Big Reginald any chance to cross the wall of fire and engage in close-quarters combat with him. Bang! 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 Julia's tactics could be described as textbook reenactment. However, she didn't realize one point. The most crucial point. That huge Reginald wasn't just big on the outside. It was probably the complete opposite of the Reginald that Julia was familiar with. The action of swinging the blade casually to cut down the grenade, and even the bullets fired from the 130mm rifle, was not something that could be done by the Reginald's operating system. As the test pilot of the Reginald, Julia knew the limits of the Reginald very well. Is it the Alea consciousness system? Sure enough, it's extremely stupid. Even though she had seen through Reginald, it didn't mean that victory was in her hands. The strange blade that could easily cut down the grenade and bullets could almost announce the fact that Julia's Reginald had lost its long-range lethality. Facing this fact, Julia only had one last choice. A choice that she was unwilling to make, but she had to make. That was a hand-to-hand battle. While thinking quickly, Julia's Reginald raised its right hand and threw the 130mm rifle in its hand at the enemy. Then, taking advantage of the moment, when the 130mm rifle swept through the air and attracted Igakuzan's attention, Julia quickly controlled the body to lower its body, pulled out the long sword, and burst the power of the propulsion engine. She rushed through the wall of fire like lightning and raised the sword to stab the cockpit of the huge Reginald. No matter how strange this regen rays, which was much larger than the regen rays, was, as long as the cockpit was pierced, the battle would be over. The revenge would be completed. Buzz! The blade cut through the air, and Igakuzan's attention was indeed attracted by the 130mm rifle. He only swung the blade and cut the 130mm rifle in half. Got it! Julia's eyes flashed, but the movements of her hands didn't slow down because of this. Instead, they became even fiercer. Before the blade pierced through the enemy's cockpit, Julia's attack could only become fiercer. Bang! The moment the blade was about to pierce through the cockpit, the sound of metal colliding suddenly rang out. Reginald, who was still charging forward, suddenly lost its balance and fell to the ground. Such a sudden change almost made Julia unable to react. Fortunately, the moment Reginald Rez was about to hit the ground, Julia instinctively squeezed out the thrust of the body's propulsion engine. That was how she managed to avoid the result of the heavy body colliding with the ground. However, she avoided the impact, but she couldn't avoid the attack from behind. Without waiting for Reginald to stabilize himself, a cold light followed closely behind like a ghost and cut off Reginald's right arm with a single strike. In the ear-piercing alarm, Julia quickly controlled the body to turn around and swing her left fist to meet the enemy. Bang! There was another sound of metal colliding. Julia's Reginald's left fist, equipped with the GR-E11 glove, was easily blocked by the huge Reginald's right arm. The GR-E11 glove, which should have been enough to smash most MS armor, was like a joke. It couldn't penetrate the huge Reginald's armor at all. Jurita Juris, is this all you've got? Iogo's angry voice rumbled into Julieta's ears like thunder, making her feel dizzy. Shut up, traitor. Julia endured the sudden dizziness and quickly responded. She tried to increase the distance between the two airframes again. Unexpectedly, when his opponent was blocking his left fist, he had already caught Reginald Rez's left fist tightly. At this moment, both Reginald and Julia had no way to escape. Traitor? Then, I'll show you the justice you call a traitor. In Iogo's loud voice, the huge Reginald reached out and grabbed the cockpit door of Julia's Reginald, then squeezed hard. Ka! Ka! Under the grip of the huge Reginald, the thick armor plate was as fragile as paper. It only made a meaningless howl before it was torn apart, revealing Julia sitting in the cockpit. Then, a series of wriggling black shadows spread out from the arm of the giant Reginrise and rushed into the cockpit where Julieta was. Iogo Kazan, what are you doing? Monster! Looking at the twisting black shadow pouring in through the torn cockpit door, Julia felt a chill run down her spine and curse it out loud. Right now, it was undoubtedly a matter of life and death. Even if Julia didn't know what kind of monster those twisting black shadows were, the ominous aura had already explained everything. Without hesitation, Julia's right hand touched the right side of the console and suddenly pressed a red button there. Boom! The moment a slight explosion sounded, the terrifying force of Reginald that tightly controlled Julia immediately disappeared and could no longer control Reginald's movements. The reason for this outcome was that Jurita had activated Reginald's emergency program. Her left arm, which was controlled by the huge Reginald, was blown off. With the courage of losing an arm to survive, she tried her best to escape from the strange and terrifying distorted shadow. In the end, she was lucky, as Reginald, who lost an arm to survive, quickly retreated. The twisting black shadows that shrouded Julia's head also retreated like a tide. The crisis had retreated. In addition, there was a piece of news that made Julia overjoyed. Julia, you did a great job. Now step back. The final punishment will be completed by me, the Aryan Head Fleet. Along with the voice of Ristal Aryan in the communication channel, starlight flashed above Reginald's head. It was as if the stars in the sky scattered beautiful and spectacular starlight in this area. And this beautiful and spectacular starlight was rapidly falling toward the huge Reginald. In an instant, the starlight that fell from the sky disappeared in a flash and set off a terrifying impact that tore the earth where the huge Reginald was. It was a metal rod that was shot out by a forbidden weapon called Die and Sniff. The ultra-high speed of the weapon when it was shot, coupled with the enhancement of the gravity well, these seemingly ordinary metal rods transformed into the most terrifying weapons in the world. From the void above, the metal rods that could pierce through the sky and penetrate the earth in one strike poured down toward the huge Reginald. This attack was from the bridge of the mothership in the void. Ristal, who commanded the Aryan Head fleet, was determined to win. The Starlight hit the ground with a loud bang. In the terrifying shockwave that tore the huge Reginitz apart, Julie Reginitz, who had lost both of her arms, was forced to retreat. Finally, under the protection of a building that was lucky enough to survive the shockwave, she managed to stabilize her body. Looking at the rolling smoke and dust in front of her and the metal rods falling from the sky one after another, Julieta knew that her mission might have been completed. Die Sniff. This was another forbidden weapon that ended the sacrificial war in addition to the legendary 72 demons. With such a terrifying attack power, there was probably no MS that could survive. In fact, this was the case. This seemingly brilliant but extremely terrifying starlight finally had an end. Even if the Die Sniff troops arranged above the gap in the sky were all of the Aryan Head fleet, they had to temporarily stop the terrifying attack after a round of shooting. In the rolling smoke and dust, the mysterious buildings with many exotic colors seemed to have been wantonly turned over and destroyed by a 3-year-old child. They became shattered and no longer had the mysterious appearance from before. And the area where the huge Reginald was more like the fried rice that was turned over and over by the chef over and over again. Mixed with the surrounding vegetation and the wreckage of the buildings, it was particularly shocking. No matter who it was, when they saw this tragic scene, they would subconsciously think that the ferocious Reginald must be dead. The sound of the surrounding buildings shattering came one after another. Julia, who had finally recovered from the attack of Die Sniff's troops, calmed down a little. Once again, she tried to drive her body that had lost its arms slowly toward the burial place of the huge Reginald. Julia was very clear about Die Sniff's attack power, but she needed to confirm the current situation of Iago Kazan. Regardless of whether he was dead or alive, his existence would definitely have a great impact on the current Lars Horn and even Rydell. The wind blew gently, blowing away the billowing smoke and dust, and also exposing the forest covered by the smoke and dust to Julia's eyes. It was a forest of thorns formed by the metal rods shot by Die Sniff. The sharp black metal rods either pierced straight or slanted down from the sky, piercing through the huge body and nailing it to the ground. Looking at the cockpit that was pierced by 3 metal rods in turn, looking at the captivating red flowing down from between the metal rods, Yi Zichen was stunned. Julia seemed to be relieved. The war against the rebels had come to an end. Julia Juris, calling the Aryan Head fleet. Julia wasn't sure if she could contact the Aryan Head fleet in the void in this situation, but she believed that the man she respected must have seen everything. However, what Jurita was waiting for was not a communication from Aryan Head's fleet. Instead, it was a burst of crazy laughter. Ha 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 ha! Die Sniff. It's actually Die Sniff. In the wild laughter, the trace of human voice dissipated like an avalanche. In the blink of an eye, it turned into an unpleasant and extremely unsettling sound that sounded like metal rubbing against each other. However, no matter how the voice changed, Julia was able to immediately recognize the owner of the voice. Iago Kazan. He's not dead. That's right. The metal-like voice came from the forest of thorns. At the same time, the huge Reginald and even the metal rods that pierced through it underwent a change that Julia could not understand. Melt, melt, as if it had encountered an extremely high temperature. The huge Reginald and the metal plates that pierced through it quickly melted, turning from a tangible artificial metal into an invisible liquid at an extremely fast speed. It was a slowly flowing, eerie, pitch-black liquid. Lord Rydell, why? Why are you doing this to me? I just want to show the justice I pursue. There was a trace of unwillingness, a trace of anger, but more of madness in the voice. As the pitch-black liquid continued to surge with the sound, an ominous feeling suddenly flashed through Julia's heart. Just as she subconsciously wanted to take action, An angry face emerged from the pitch-black liquid and glared at the void above her head. Then, the giant mouth opened angrily. A beam of light shot into the sky, pierced through the sky, and headed straight for the location of the Aryan Head fleet. Chapter 753. Surging, rolling, the face that could not be seen at all, it was still condensed from the mechanical liquid just now, and it made Jurita feel fear. She did not understand what was happening in front of her, but she understood that Ayagul Kazan, who should have died under Dying Sniff's attack, had been resurrected in a way that she could not understand. Moreover, the pillar of light tore through the clouds and even pierced through the atmosphere. Its goal was self-evident. Lord Ristelrun. The moment she saw the huge face that was very similar to Ayagul Kazan shoot out the pillar of light towards the sky, Jurita instinctively increased the speed of the landline to the limit while shouting for the fleet above the starry sky through the emergency communication. Warning! Warning! High-energy reaction detected. Fortunately, the huge face changed quickly, and the pillar of light erupted quickly, but it could not offset the distance between the Earth and the starry sky, thus giving Aryan Head's fleet a little time to react. However, it was only a little time to react. When the warning of the radar staff came to Rydal Elian's ears, he had already ordered the entire fleet to launch an emergency maneuver, trying to avoid the pillar of light that could penetrate the sky from the ground and pose a threat to the fleet in space. No one could guarantee that the beam of light wasn't just for show. Just the momentum that could penetrate the sky was enough to raise everyone's vigilance. However, the fleet's movement could not be completed in an instant. At this moment, beside the pillar of light that soared into the sky, a small figure quickly greeted it. It was Reginald. It was Jurita Juris. The MS, who had lost her arms, rushed towards the pillar of light without fear, trying to use her meager and almost negligible strength to change the direction of the pillar of light and shoot it towards Aryan Head's fleet that could not dodge in time. Suddenly, in front of Reginald's resolute figure, the face suddenly opened its eyes. After the huge eyeball looked at the sky above, it suddenly turned and looked at Reginald, who was rushing towards it. Jurita Juris, don't hinder me, you little dog. The huge face, the pillar of light that soared into the sky. There was also that huge eyeball that was rotating and staring at him, making him shudder. However, the Reginald Rez that Julia was piloting was like an arrow that would never turn back. It directly collided with the huge eyeball that was staring at her and the Reginald Rez that she was piloting. Huh. Ah! There was a muffled sound of flesh hitting flesh. It was broken by the cold mech, and bright red blood splattered everywhere. And that heart-wrenching howl became the signal that interrupted the beam of light shooting into space. The beam of light that shot into the sky suddenly stopped, allowing Aryan Head's fleet, which had almost been pierced through by the beam of light from the bottom to the top, to escape the calamity. The high-energy reaction has disappeared. We survived. In the bridge of the mothership, the radar officer was both scared and glad as he loudly announced the result of the fleet's escape. But amidst the cheers, Ristal Arian's brows were furrowed. It was not hard to imagine that the disappearance of the beam of light that almost destroyed the entire fleet must have something to do with Julia and the others who were fighting on the ground. Quick! Order Diansniff's troops to speed up the reloading and launch the second round of attacks as soon as possible. No matter what, Ristal had to grasp the power to launch another attack on the enemy as soon as possible. Ah! Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Painful howls resounded across the broken ground. The mech with a broken arm that was covered in bright red retreated continuously and finally knelt on the ground powerlessly. Julia endured the dizziness and revealed a smile of success. The attack that she had launched with all her might had finally achieved her goal. Even if Reginald Rez had lost most of its ability, it was enough. At least, during this period of time, Aryan Head's fleet should have been able to ascend to a higher orbit and leave the extreme distance that the Pillar of Light could reach. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Julia, you damned puppy! Why are you hindering me? Why can't you understand my justice? Pain continued to tear at the huge face. On the face that resembled Egu Kuzan's face, there were waves of surging waves that twisted this increasingly ferocious and terrifying face. This was especially true for the huge eyeball that Reginald had smashed into. The bright red liquid that was gushing out slowly stopped, and in just a few seconds, the flesh and blood that had been turned over actually repaired the huge eyeball that had been smashed into it. As the flesh and blood rolled, the pale flesh slid down the regenerated eyeball from top to bottom. The huge eyeball once again stared at Reginald Rez, who was kneeling on the ground. Julia could even see the miserable state of the broken arm Reginald Rez that she was piloting from the newly repaired eye. What a monster! Julietta's rejoicing disappeared like an avalanche, leaving behind a mixture of regret, fear, and even hatred. G. It was the sound of metal being twisted. It was the sound of the broken arm Reginald Rez being tightly entangled by something and beginning to be dragged. Julia didn't have any strength to stop all of this. It was the same for her landline Reginald Rez. In the next second, from the constantly shaking screen, she saw the black shadows entangling Reginald Rez. It was the black shadows that stretched out from under the huge face. They were like strong and powerful palms, tightly controlling every vital part of Reginald Rez's body, not giving him any chance to break free. It was even more impossible to give Reginald Rez a chance to self-destruct and escape from its hands. Boom! All of a sudden, a violent tremor hit her, causing her to feel dizzy and a sense of being suspended in the air. If it weren't for the seat belt on her body that was strong enough to protect her from the impact of the tumbling, Julia would have fainted in the cockpit. Julia, asterisk, 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 asterisk. In the dizziness, Julia saw the huge face on the screen. It turned out that the black shadows entangling Reginald Rez had brought him to the huge face. The eyes on the distorted face stared at Reginald Rez, who couldn't move, and the crazy eyes were full of anger. The huge, bloody mouth opened again, and a gradually condensing light was aimed at Reginald Rez. Cough. Haha. Can't speak anymore. Iogo Kazan. You stupid, noisy guy. In the next moment, Reginald Rez and Julia, sitting in his cockpit, were filled with dazzling light. Boom! The air was trembling. The wind was roaring. The clouds were torn apart again. After destroying Reginald Rez, the beam of light rose into the sky again and went straight to Aryan Head's fleet that had ascended to a higher orbit. Warning: high-energy reaction detected again. It's the same as the location detected just now. When the warning sounded again, the bridge was already calm. Where's Julia? Ristel looked at the huge hole below and asked slowly. No, we didn't contact Julia Julius. There was a short signal connection just now, and it seemed to be the signal that Reginald Rez was destroyed. Is that so? Ristel nodded silently and gave the order again. Dinsnef's troops attack. From the bottom to the top, the sky was once again torn apart. On the huge pillar of light that shot into space, Dinsnef's troops, who had finished loading their ammunition, fired with a loud bang. The metal rods once again shot towards the huge face. Starlight poured down in torrents. The beam of light rushed up into the void. This moment was as long as a century and as short as the blink of an eye. Boom! Boom! The only similarity was the terrifying movement that buried the target. In space, Aryan Head's fleet was swept by the beam of light, and more than half of the warships, including Ristelarian's flagship, were sunk. In the continuous explosions, there were almost no cries for help. There were only screams from the warships at the edge of the beam of light attack. Below, on the ground that was once again destroyed by Dinsnef's troops, the forest of thorns once again stood on the shattered ground, piercing through the distorted, angry face once again. The powerful kinetic energy contained in the metal rods that had yet to dissipate instantly tore apart the life force of the distorted face, directly pushing it to the edge of death once again. In the residual vision that was pierced by the metal rods, Ayagakuzan's last gaze was fixed on the sky that was occupied by the light that erupted from the warships. His bloody mouth trembled slightly, but he never said a word. Pa! In the next second, the huge distorted face exploded with a loud bang. Like a rainstorm, the bright red liquid wantonly washed everything around it. The metal rods that were like a forest of thorns, the shattered buildings, and the vegetation that remained on this shattered land. This battle that followed the same system ended in the end, with the deaths of Ristal Elian, Jurita Julis, and Ayagu Kazan. The battle in the giant egg was still going on. As long as one was nearby, the commotion caused by the two beams of light that pierced through the sky would definitely be noticed, especially when the second beam of light erupted. Ray Minkai and the others seemed to have heard the sound of an MS exploding. Julia, no. Is it over on Aryan Head's side? McGillis raised his head and looked at the starry sky. He knew that it was the light of death emitted when the warship exploded. I'm afraid so. Ray Minkai nodded. I can't contact the rear anymore. It seems that we're the only ones left. Kalta had tried to contact the rear from the beginning, but he failed in the end. And from Gout to Babados, who was in charge of security, came the voice of 3 suns and moons. Hey, Your Excellency, Chocolate, there's a situation over there. In an instant, everyone entered a state of alert. At this moment, they were already deep inside the giant egg. With the huge commotion caused by the battle between Julieta and Ayagu, the enemy was bound to notice their lone troop. Pa 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 pa. Applause suddenly sounded, causing everyone to be a little stunned. Not bad, not bad, not bad. The man's voice echoed in the surrounding buildings, making it impossible to pinpoint his direction. Isnario Farid. McGillis would never forget this voice. This was the man who gave him humiliation, but also gave him his original position. That's right. It's me, Isnario Farid. Long time no see. My good son, McGillis Farid. That voice continued to shake the air, but no figure appeared in front of everyone. Come out, Isnario Farid. Still want to hide in the dark and scheme against us? McGillis coldly shouted. Ha ha ha. Don't be impatient. My dear son, you weren't such a cute person back then. However, Kalta frowned when he heard the words that came out of the laughter. She seemed to have noticed something, but she didn't say it. Among the others, one, as a party, kept his mouth shut, and the other, as an insider, Ray Minkai, didn't want to mention it. As for the last one, he didn't want to take care of these messy things, and just wanted to solve these things with his fists as soon as possible. Seeing that his words did not provoke McGillis's rebound, when the man spoke again, there was the sound of the MA army gathering around again. McGillis, if you want to see me, just come up. But remember, I will love you as much as before. Ha ha ha. Amidst the laughter, McGillis actually didn't say a word. He directly drove the gun to Barry and rushed up, looking as if he was going to meet the appointment alone with a determined look. McGillis, don't act rashly. As soon as Kalta saw Gout de Barry rushing straight to the MA army, she instinctively issued a reminder. But McGillis ignored it. Kalta didn't know that McGillis was angry at this moment. Yes, originally, he thought that he would be able to obtain the greatest power in the world after ascending to the High Baal Force. However, he was faced with even greater and more terrifying powers time and time again. This was the case in the battle where the long-toothed lion broke the giant egg. The same was the case in the battle between Jurita and Ayagu. If this goes on, what is the meaning of ascending Gaudabayari? The man's laughter was undoubtedly mocking him for overestimating his own capabilities. Just like the young McGillis who showed his strength in order to get out of trouble, but was brought into the next vortex. Let him go. Kalta. Ray Minkai stopped Kalta, who wanted to catch up. That's McGillis's battle to get rid of the shadow of the past. Either burn out, or become a cute person from then on. Chapter 754. Passing through layers upon layers of obstacles. The wind, like Gundaburi, finally chased after the man's back and came to a lake surrounded by many exotic buildings. The terrain here? McGillis, who once read all kinds of books and documents to get out of his predicament, could not find any records similar to what he saw in front of him. Even if, in those books and documents, there were records of the past appearance of the land under his feet before the terrifying sacrificial war. But that was a matter of hundreds of years ago. Moreover, everything in front of him could no longer be explained by common sense. Are you scared? My dear son. Ripples appeared out of nowhere and continued to spread on the surface of the lake. As the ripples spread, the lake, which was surrounded by the foreign buildings, became darker and darker. It was not that there was something polluting the lake, but in the depths of the lake, a huge monster was awakening. Under the gaze of Gaudabeiri and McGillis, the huge black shadow appeared in front of Gaudabeiri and McGillis. The moment the huge black shadow dyed the lake completely black, it set off layers of huge waves and appeared in front of Gaudabeiri. The huge waves continued to roll from the depths of the lake to the shore. It washed away the surrounding foreign buildings and overturned the fragile vegetation. It rushed to Gaudabeiri's feet and wantonly hung the strange vegetation on Beiri's leg armor. But this did not attract McGillis' attention. The moment the huge waves were overturned, McGillis' eyes had already fallen on the huge black shadow that appeared from the bottom of the lake. It was a gigantic body covered in an ominous black aura. From the long, sharp head and the wide wing-like shoulder armor on its left and right arms, this huge body covered in ominous black gas was very likely an old acquaintance, M.A. Hammond's. However, in more details, the huge body in front of him could not be compared to the M.A. Hammonds in McGillis' memory. Isnario Farid. I didn't expect you to become like this. McGillis's gaze slowly moved up and fixed on the area under the huge black shadow's long and sharp head, between its slender neck and chest. There was a silhouette there. It was a figure that McGillis would never forget in his entire life. In the past 10 years, it had brought him humiliation, suffering, and even pain every single day. Yes, it was the man who became his adoptive father under the name of Isnario Farid. His thoughts began to rise and fall, but McGillis's expression remained calm. I didn't expect you to become like this. Brigadier General Farid. In McGillis' eyes, the once familiar figure could no longer be considered human. Even though the gradually aged face once again became young, the withered body once again obtaining a strong body, McGillis still saw the black flames that split the young body into two when his gaze shifted downwards. Wisps of black flames, as if breathing, seeped out from the joints between the body and the machine, slowly coiling around the man, named Isnario Farid from the bottom to the top, like a python, strangling its prey. Embarrassing? McGillis' mocking tone made Isnario snort coldly. In the increasingly bright black flames, he slowly raised his right hand in the direction of Gaudabeiri. Isnario's voice was impassioned. You call this embarrassing? McGillis, I didn't expect you to be such a shallow person. My old body has already withered, and I can't even dote on you anymore. Dote on you? That's just to satisfy your sinful desires. Isnario Farid, in my eyes, your existence is just a sin that stains the name of 7 stars. McGillis shouted coldly. He didn't hold back at all as he denounced the sins that Isnario Farid had committed against him over the past decade. Suddenly, Isnario Farid was stunned as well. In the past decade, no matter how he treated McGillis, this little sheep that he had designated as Farid's future successor could only resign himself to it. Such an obedient little sheep actually had a day when he would retaliate. How preposterous was this? It seems that my indulgence toward you has caused you to develop unnecessary, rebellious thoughts. As soon as Isnario's voice fell, a beam of light erupted without warning, sweeping towards Gudaberry's location. Although this beam of light was extremely fast and impossible to guard against, McGillis was still able to dodge this sudden beam of light with the help of the Alea consciousness system. The Alea consciousness system? I didn't expect you to use it better than Ayagul Kazan. Is it a constitution, or is it a personal difference? On the left shoulder of the giant shadow, the beam of light slowly closed up like a blooming flower. Isnario also said something that caught McGillis' attention. Ayagul Kazan. Yes. Kazan's betrayal is really interesting. I only gave him a little guidance, and this brat thought that the supreme existence was his goddess of justice. Ha 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 ha. What a joke. Isnario's laughter swept across the lake like rolling thunder, sweeping towards Gudaberry. McGillis was silent. The truth might be that simple. But in front of the truth, the price might be the lives of the Aryan Head fleet and the heads of the Kazan and Aryan families. Then, Isnario Farid, in the name of Lars Horn and the Seven Stars Conference, I declare that I will launch a crusade against you in the name of Gudaberry. Berry? McGillis, you are still as naive as ever. Fine, come and try. Isnario's gaze changed, and the black fire wrapped around his waist suddenly surged. In the blink of an eye, it completely enveloped him and quickly melted into the giant body. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At that moment, the sharp head was raised high and burst out a roar that shook heaven and earth. It sounded like the cry of a bird. It also sounded like the roar of a beast. That strange feeling still shrouded McGillis' heart, and it did not dissipate for a long time. However, the blade was still raised. The Gundam Bale seemed to have sensed what McGillis was thinking. It raised the blade in its hand firmly, and then the thrusters exploded. It swept across the lake like an arrow leaving the bow, heading straight for the front of the huge body. Buzz! The blade vibrated, and, as it tore through the air, it went straight for the sharp head. It was fine if he did not make a move, but once he made a move, he went straight for the vital points. The seemingly enlarged version of M.A. Hammond's did not allow McGillis to directly copy M.A. Hammond's weakness. Instead, he chose a more appropriate approach. No matter how the body was designed or built, the head was bound to be one of its weaknesses. As long as it was destroyed, the surveillance system will be damaged. Bang! Gudaberry's blade was blocked. What blocked it was not any man-made metal object, but a writhing, ghostly shadow that looked like a living creature. The ghostly shadow, which did not look like a blade that could pierce through Gretz's armor with a single strike, had effortlessly blocked the blade that was as high as Bale's force. Pop! There was an explosion in the void. McGillis' heart trembled, and he subconsciously controlled Gudaberry to quickly retreat. At the same time, a black shadow passed through the gap created by the Gundam's Bale force. If Gudaberry's movements were half a second slower, he would have been attacked. Judging from the sound of the explosion, even if the high Bay force was able to withstand this attack, it would not end well for him. You ran really fast. McGillis, Ayagul Kazan isn't as good at using the Alea consciousness system as you are. Isnario's cold laughter gradually sounded. The image of Isnario's twisted, smug smile appeared in McGillis's mind. Yes, that smile was deeply engraved in McGillis' humiliated memory in the countless nights in the past. The blade swept across the surface of the water, stirring up a huge wall of water, which completely blocked the vision of the gigantic mech and caused it to lose sight of the Gundabaev. The blade trembled, and the humming sound in the air came wave after wave, constantly reverberating around the lake and between the surrounding foreign buildings. But there was no trace of Gudaberry. At this moment, other than the slowly falling wall of water and the huge body standing on the lake, there was only the endless humming of the sword. When the humming of the sword reached its peak, everything in the surroundings strangely quieted down. It was as if this battle had ended with Gudaberry fleeing. Bang! Boom! However, the silent atmosphere did not last long. The sound of metal colliding followed by the roar of an explosion. The blade broke, and Gaudabayri's rapidly retreating figure was left with traces of smoke from the explosion. And the huge body did not succeed in resisting Gaudabayri's surprise attack. Because as the blade of the bale force broke, the gigantic mech also paid the price of several black shadows being cut apart and exploding with a loud bang. I see. The smoke from the explosion of the black shadows had not completely dissipated, but McGillis had already caught a glimpse of the strange black shadow's true appearance. A highly concentrated energy aggregate, but Isnario didn't give McGillis any explanation for his thoughts. In the blink of an eye, the few black shadows that Gaudabayri had cut off at the cost of the broken blade grew back and returned to their original twisted and terrifying appearance. This is a supreme power. McGillis, do you think I don't know? From the sound of his voice, Isnario was perhaps very complacent and pleased with himself. That night, when you were secretly flipping through the autobiography of Agunica Cairo, did you think I had already fallen asleep? McGillis, don't be so naive. That was just a game that treats you like a plaything. Boom! Gaudabayri's thrusters suddenly exploded, turning into a stream of light that swept across the lake, moving around the huge body at high speed. Sometimes on the right, sometimes on the left, sometimes forward, sometimes retreating. At this moment, McGillis fully utilized the mobility of Gaudabayri's berry. Very good. Very good. McGillis, looks like this is the power you've been pursuing. But unfortunately, you're just a plaything in the end. The moment the blade pierced through the air and pierced the huge body's chest, Isnario Farid smiled coldly, and something unexpected happened. Boom! The surface of the water surged, and a water column soared into the sky, separating the huge body and Gaudabayri in two independent small spaces. Even the blade that was strong enough to cut through gray steel armor was no match for the water column that soared into the sky. It was forcibly sent flying from Gauda's hands into the sky. What? Gaudabayri took a step back, but to his surprise, dozens of black shadows shot out from the water column. In the blink of an eye, it had wrapped around Gauda's iron force, making it impossible for him to move. No matter what McGillis tried, he could not make Gauda's Bayline move again. Look, no matter what kind of power you have, you are just a plaything. McGillis. As the water column slowly fell, the huge body appeared in front of Gauda, Bayline, and McGillis, but its appearance had changed greatly. The body that was extremely similar to M.A. Hammond's had unknowingly turned into a humanoid body. A head that was similar to Baeli's. A chest that was similar to Gauda Babado's. A pair of feet that was similar to Gauda Simon's. McGillis, who was well-read, was able to recognize the various parts that were somewhat similar to the legendary 72 demons. Isnario Farid. I didn't expect you to have a hobby of piecing things together. Piecing things together? You can say that. But this is just a body. The huge body that had turned into a humanoid clenched its right hand, and the black shadows that were wrapped around Gaudabayri exerted force, continuously contracting its strength as if it wanted to shatter Gauda's Bayri. Legend has it that the person who can activate Gaudabayri will be able to obtain the loyalty and obedience of Lars Horn from top to bottom. This was recorded in Agunica Kailu's autobiography. This is real, but this is also a residue that should be swept into the pile of history. Gujiji. McGillis heard the screams of the body being distorted, and Isnario Farid's mocking voice rang in his ears. You who believe in outdated residue, how laughable, how cute. So cute that you're so naive that you think that if someone give you a bunch of grass, you'll be able to completely trust the other party and be manipulated by them. McGillis, do you remember? You are just a plaything. The huge body exerted force in its right fist, and the black shadows that were wrapped around Gaudabayri instantly went berserk, instantly distorting it completely. Traces of black engine oil fell like rain, and the legend that was regarded as the pinnacle of Lars Horn fell into a deathly silence. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.